It was daytime at Yahai City's Level 2 gathering spot. In the ophthalmology department's consultation room, Dr. Zhao was talking to a guy named Jian Yu. Dr. Zhao, listening to Jian Yu, started wondering if he was in the wrong place. Noticing Jian Yu didn't quite look like someone transitioning to Zone X, Dr. Zhao asked him to repeat his symptoms. Jian Yu mentioned his eyes were just uncomfortable. His eyes went bloodshot as he forced them open wider. He stared at Dr. Zhao, explaining how everything looked like it had a red filter over it. The red layer kept covering Dr. Zhao, making him look kinda ominous. Out of nowhere, a health bar started floating above Dr. Zhao's head. The health bar grew clearer, and Dr. Zhao casually asked Jian Yu his age. Jian Yu noticed the bar was at 18%, and without thinking, he blurted it out loud. Confused, Jian Yu double-checked if Dr. Zhao was asking about his age. Dr. Zhao was getting annoyed, wondering if this guy was even in the right department. Meanwhile, Jian Yu stayed distracted, wondering if the red layer was actually blood. 18%? That should mean Dr. Zhao was close to death, but he looked full of energy. Dr. Zhao, cutting through the confusion, asked if Jian Yu had been drinking, and Jian Yu, still distracted, wondered if he meant that day. Dr. Zhao was too annoyed to respond, and Jian Yu grew nervous when he saw the look on his face. Jian Yu shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He cleared his throat, mumbling an apology for being so distracted. Dr. Zhao, still frustrated, told Jian Yu he couldn't concentrate with all this going on. Dr. Zhao decided to let it go, focusing on Jian Yu's eyes instead. He started checking out Jian Yu's eyes. Holding Jian Yu's eyes open, Dr. Zhao told him to look right. Then, Dr. Zhao instructed him to look left. Jian Yu followed along. After a quick inspection, Dr. Zhao looked puzzled, then confirmed that Jian Yu's eyes seemed fine. Jian Yu shut his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, a bloody figure stared back from his pupil. A few moments later, he was in the hospital hallway. Jian Yu scanned the area. The red health bars still floated over everyone, clearly visible. Walking down the hall, he kept observing. A grin spread across his face. Forget conjunctivitis, his Midas touch had definitely kicked in. But he couldn't help wondering what good seeing a blood layer really was. A few moments later, he was already out of the hospital. Walking down the street, he heard an announcement about a new round of recruitment for night patrols to keep the streets safe. The announcement mentioned a safe haven established 99 years after the Great Cataclysm. Mutants were retreating, and apparently, the future was all set for the great show. Jian Yu kept walking, deciding it was better to figure out his situation once he got home. Suddenly, he noticed his shoelace was undone. He crouched to tie it. But something caught his eye, making him freeze in place. His surroundings shifted in an instant. He was swallowed by green hues, and the people and chatter around him vanished. A heavy, ominous aura surrounded him. He froze, drenched in sweat, overwhelmed with fear. Out of nowhere, a dark figure appeared in his vision, drawing closer. Terrified, he looked up. The moon was green, glowing eerily. The city around him was completely deserted. Then, out of nowhere, a woman with a sword landed beside him. Her health bar was at 93%, and she was taking on a monster sitting at 68%. A full battle raged before him, with soldiers clashing against monsters. Jian Yu figured this situation was a bit more than he could handle. Looking up, he saw the green moon with a health bar of 999,999 coming closer, and panic? Yeah, he could start that any time now. A glowing air bubble floated by, looking way too out of place. It was definitely coming from the sky. They were falling straight to the ground. A couple of them headed his way. They popped against his forehead, and the eerie green world around him started to fade. Suddenly, he was back in reality, standing in the middle of a crosswalk with people chatting around him. An old man was warned to watch his step while crossing the street. The announcement praised the Night Patrol Bureau's support during the Great Cataclysm and the city's safety. Meanwhile, Jian Yu stood still in the road, with a child calling him foolish. A merchant was pitching his factory-made medicine for 5,000, claiming the real stuff costs 50,000. Jian Yu kept walking, skeptical if this city was really as safe as everyone said. Glancing at the sun with its own 999,999 health bar, he wondered if everything around him was just a well-crafted lie. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was the same merchant, asking if he wanted to buy some medicine. He assured Jian Yu that his factory-made stuff was just as good as the real deal. Jian Yu casually picked his nose and asked how the merchant could sell medicine when monsters roamed the city. Did he think he was some kind of medicine god? The merchant boasted about having all kinds of medicine. Jian Yu asked if the meds were free, and the merchant walked off, warning him that he'd regret it if he didn't buy. Also, apparently, there were no monsters. Jianyu approached him again, saying chill, I was joking, and asked if he had any divine oil for sale. A little while later, Jianyu found himself on a bus. He thought the divine oil at 3,000 was a bit much, and the merchant shouldn't be mad if he reported him to the cops. Glancing outside, he saw a typical street, wondering why he was being so paranoid. Moments later, the bus pulled up to a stop. The system chimed in, announcing the bus had arrived at Huinan Road. Passengers were told to get ready to hop off. Out of nowhere, Jianyu felt that weird sensation again. His world turned green once more. He glanced around, and once again, the people vanished. His eyes went wide, but the green began to fade. He looked around again, everything was normal. Was this just another hallucination? He checked himself out, wondering if it was time for his second growth spurt. As the bus left, he thought he'd been feeling some pain and probably needed to check it out when he got home. He lived in a building called Dusk. Inside, he just wrapped up his shower. He looked in the mirror and froze. There was a pattern on his chest. Why was that there? He stared at it, thinking it looked familiar, like he'd seen it somewhere. Then, it hit him, the pattern matched the one from the guy who'd hit him earlier. It was from that book that jumped at him in the library. Suddenly, the pattern began to glow, and Jianyu was caught off guard. A dark, ominous aura poured out of him, and he found himself kneeling on the bathroom floor. He groaned, feeling the heat intensify. Grabbing the shower head, he let the water run. He poured water over the pattern and sighed in relief, finally, feeling better. The dark aura faded, and when he looked in the mirror again, his health bar was back to 100%. Surprised, he chuckled. Now that was more like it. A few moments later, his shadow started twitching in the bathroom. It slithered away, catching Jianyu's attention. He looked down, completely confused. Panic set in. Where had his shadow gone? He scanned the bathroom, half expecting his shadow to be gone for good. Then, he spotted it on the wall, feeling relieved. He almost thought he lost it, honestly. With all the weirdness today, it wouldn't have been the strangest thing. As he headed out of the bathroom, he couldn't help but appreciate how good the bath had felt. He reached for the door handle. When he opened the door, an eerie shadow loomed right in front of him. The shadow stared right back, leaving him frozen in place. He couldn't look away, locked in a stare-off with it. It was as if he was studying it closely. Finally, he stepped out of the bathroom. He nodded, accepting it. This was definitely not simple. His heart suddenly began to glow. The ominous green aura returned, and he thought, well, at least his shadow didn't bail, but now it was alive. The two of them stood there, the green aura still swirling around him as he clutched his chest in pain. It was already evening. Silence hung in the air in his home. His shadow was still hanging around, very much alive. He eyed it, then asked it to raise its left hand. He couldn't help but grin when it obeyed. Next, he told it to raise its right leg. The shadow awkwardly lifted its leg. With a mischievous smile, he watched, not saying a word. The shadow, clearly nervous, fidgeted under his gaze. He ordered it to dance, and of course, the shadow obeyed without hesitation. His head buzzed with confusion. How had that shadow even shown up? Out of nowhere, a bright orb appeared from his chest. The orb floated above him. The orb spun like a spinning wheel, flashing symbols as it went. It kept spinning, like it was trying to decide something. Finally, it landed on the word human. A system popped up, showing an attribute panel for his shadow. Jianyu's excitement was pretty clear. He quickly clicked on the panel. The panel revealed Jianyu's shadow, linked to him with synchronized strengths and memories. It obeyed simple commands but lacked independent thought. It suggested that commanding it to exercise could yield gains. He glanced at the shadow, still dancing like it was auditioning for a talent show. Reaching out, his hand passed right through it. Had no physical form and couldn't talk. The shadow stared back, silently, doing nothing. He asked the shadow if it really remembered everything. The shadow nodded, confirming it. He scrambled to find something on his desk. He grabbed a complex math problem he'd written, calling the shadow over. He handed it over, explaining it was his summer homework, and passed the pen. The shadow took the pen, and Jianyu was surprised it could actually hold it. As the shadow sat at the table, Jianyu kept poking it, unsure if it had a real body or not. He was getting a little creeped out. After writing something, the shadow set the pen down and looked at him. He asked why it had stopped writing. The shadow only wrote solved on the paper. Jianyu, angry, told the shadow that remembering everything was nonsense, claiming he could solve it in 2 minutes. He tried hitting it with paper, but it passed right through. Remembering the panel's description, he wondered if the problem was too hard. He told the shadow to just write out the lesson instead. The shadow swiftly began writing. The shadow was writing at lightning speed. Jianyu figured, if his shadow could cheat on tests, maybe he should just sell books instead of studying. Imagining the possibilities, Jianyu practically had steam coming out of his nose, thinking about all the cash he could make. As the shadow kept writing, Jianyu checked the attribute panel again, wondering if there were more ways to have fun with this. He clicked the panel again, eager for more details. The panel showed a skill called Shadow Devouring, meaning Jianyu could absorb shadow points from darkness to power up or break down dead stuff. Grinning, Jianyu thought about how it worked. Did he need to touch the body or just its shadow to make this devouring thing happen? He scanned the room. Moving to the corner, he thought this could be the spot. He reached his hand into the shadows. He figured this was the way to absorb some darkness. Shaking his hand to pull in the darkness, but nothing. Appalled, Jianyu realized there was no instruction manual for this power. What was he, supposed to just wing it? Then, his eyes caught another skill on the panel's shadow pupil. The panel said his eyes had changed, and with a click, he could see the dark side of the world, whether to observe or dive in. He wondered if it was the weird place he'd seen before, but decided to take it slow and see what happened next. Staring at his hand, an idea popped into his head. He told the shadow to hold off on cheating and do some push-ups to show what it could really do. The shadow nodded, staying silent. Flashing an eerie grin, the shadow began to melt into the floor. It slowly merged with the floor, like it was disappearing, until there was nothing left of it. Panicked, Jianyu wondered where it had gone. Looking frantically, he called for his shadow to come back. Suddenly, a dark portal began to form in front of him, and out stepped his shadow, like it had just returned from a vacation. Jianyu asked his shadow where it had been hiding. The shadow grabbed a pen, scribbling on paper to explain it had been on the dark side. Jianyu quickly asked what it was doing there, and the shadow wrote back, exercising. Jianyu waved it off, wondering if practicing on the dark side might actually be a good idea. The shadow gave a quick nod. It vanished back into the floor like a shadow ninja. The last bit slithered through the cracks, out of sight. Jianyu exhaled, relieved it was gone. Settling at his desk, he picked up his digital pen, ready to work. He decided it was time to get down to business. Morning arrived, birds fluttering by his window. At his computer, the only sound was snoring. Jianyu was out cold on the desk, drooling and laughing in his sleep. In his sleep, he mumbled about food and asked for a pen to draw the table. A knock at the door jolted Jianyu awake. Stretching his sore back, Jianyu groaned, then heard someone calling him to open the door. As he grabbed the doorknob, he asked, "Why the rush?" Opening the door, he found Lu Yaoyao, his childhood friend and die-hard fan, standing there. Jianyu froze when he noticed something odd. He saw her health bar dip a bit, and wondered why. Glancing at the calendar, it clicked, he knew exactly why. He asked why she was here so early, but she rushed past him, no time for answers. She told him to hurry up because she'd heard him say last night he was starting a new drawing, already picked the theme. Expectant, she said she couldn't wait to see the design collection. Then, a loud noise came from behind her, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. Jianyu slammed the door shut, and Lu Yaoyao scolded him for being dramatic about it. He stood there speechless. The door frame was cracked from the force of his closing. Jianyu froze, still processing what just went down, unable to hear Lu Yaoyao calling his name. Suddenly, Lu Yaoyao's eyes widened in surprise. Jianyu was equally shocked, staring at his own body. His muscles had noticeably bulked up, all defined and toned. Lu Yaoyao was shaking as she asked if he'd been hitting the gym recently. Realizing he was a total loner who never exercised, Lu Yaoyao was baffled by his sudden perfect muscles. She poked at his biceps, still in disbelief. Leaning in, she poked his chest muscle, asking what on earth he'd been up to. Jianyu shrugged, claiming he just lifts bookshelves daily. Lu Yaoyao, not buying it, lifted his shirt for a closer look. Jianyu denied any funny business, explaining he'd been exercising, but secretly, he wondered if his shadow's workouts were somehow syncing up with him. Jianyu was taken aback as Lu Yaoyao unexpectedly lifted his shirt to inspect his abs. Both turned red as Lu Yaoyao accused him of lying. There was no way to get abs like that from just a bit of exercise. Lu Yaoyao warned him that her dad had seen cases like this, and some things just shouldn't be messed with. He still had time to back off. Jianyu teased her, saying she was talking way too much. Suddenly, Lu Yaoyao reached out her hand toward him. With one swift motion, she locked his arms behind him and reached for something. Panicking, Jianyu wondered if she was about to pull out a weapon. To his surprise, she pulled out a wristwatch from her pocket. She slapped the watch onto his wrist, telling him to stay still. It was a device to test the pollution index. Staring at the watch, she explained that certain things like alien killing or consuming foreign objects could cause pollution. She warned that if not purified in time, it could turn someone into an abnormal being. Jianyu smirked, thinking his power was from the symbol on his chest, never expecting it to cause pollution. But to his shock, the watch reacted to the symbol on his chest. Without hesitation, Lu Yaoyao pulled out a gun, making Jianyu panic, wondering if she was about to end him. Jianyu clenched his jaw, hoping Lu Yaoyao wouldn't notice and praying the weirdness in his body would just chill out. The wristwatch slowly settled down. Lu Yaoyao spun her gun like she was in a Western movie, saying the device was fine. Jianyu awkwardly laughed, realizing she was still pointing a weapon at him. A huge sigh of relief escaped him. Lu Yaoyao casually mentioned her dad always told her to be extra careful. Trying to switch gears, Jianyu casually mentioned he'd drawn some comic characters, asking if she wanted a look. Lu Yaoyao lit up, demanding to see them now, leaving Jianyu speechless at her enthusiasm. He jokingly told her to control her excitement, since she looked like a kid on Christmas morning. But Lu Yaoyao yelled for him to hurry up and hand them over. She couldn't wait another second. A bit later, Jianyu collapsed on his bed, relieved he'd dodged a bullet literally and figuratively. He clicked the system panel, his hand hovering over it. The system logged his shadow's dark training session, and after a solid workout, it was stronger, boosting his own power too. He was taken aback to find his shadow had been training all night. A dark aura began to swirl around him. His shadow began rising off the floor, like something out of a horror movie. He summoned his shadow, watching it rise up from the floor like a slow-motion horror scene. Impressed by the results, Jianyu felt the progress but decided it was time to level up the difficulty. His shadow eagerly agreed, ready to take on the challenge. Delighted by the enthusiasm, he quickly ordered it to start with push-ups and planks. The shadow followed orders, knocking out push-ups with 2 fingers, then moving into tiger pose. He introduced a set of martial exercises, calling them the human banner. He ordered it to do squats next. He cranked up the intensity Spider-Man crawls, L positions, weighted runs, and abs. No pain, no gain. Meanwhile, Lu Yaoyao was eavesdropping, curious about all the noises. Sighing in relief, she figured Jianyu was really just training, her worries totally overblown. Lu Yaoyao was pretty stressed by Jianyu's weirdness but, relieved he was fine, decided to head home and binge some comics. On January 20th, year 99, day 1 of the Shadow Saga, Jianyu jogged around his place, trying to get in shape. His shadow trained all night, leaving him stronger, but Jianyu wasn't about to be content, he was all about leveling up. On January 21st, Jianyu pushed his shadow harder with more training. The results? Incredible. Mid-workout, Jianyu daydreamed about taking down Lu Yaoyao with 1 punch but nope, not yet, time to hit the grind harder. Jianyu thought Uncle Lee, now aging and missing an arm, wouldn't notice anything. He believed his current strength could easily defeat 3 Uncle Lees and 10 Lu Yaoyaos with 1 punch. January 23rd rolled around, and Jianyu was all about pushing harder. No time to slack, extraordinary abilities didn't come easy. On January 24th, his shadow was at it again, training while Jianyu lazily finished his work from bed. By January 25th, his shadow was still grinding away while Jianyu watched something funny on his computer. January 26th, Jianyu did 10 push-ups, yes, just 10, leaving his shadow to handle the rest of the training. After a bit, Jianyu checked his shadow stats. He was confused, the shadow points were growing super slow, needing tons of shadows just to earn 8 points. At this rate, who knew when he'd hit 10 points to activate his character? Maybe, just maybe, turning to the dark side would speed things up. A dark aura wrapped around him, pulling him into the floor like it was a comfy blanket. He shut his eyes, descending further into the mystery. Finally, he vanished completely, leaving only a faint trace of shadow behind. Meanwhile, Jianyu was in pure darkness, like a literal void. He opened his eyes to find himself in a place that looked exactly like his room. But it was dark, really dark, and he was shocked to see the dark side mirrored his room. Jianyu stepped into the eerie dark side. Now, he was outside, walking down the street, like it was just another day. He couldn't help but feel relieved to finally be free of that space. He looked around, empty streets, totally deserted. Back in his room, the door wouldn't budge, not even a little. Stuck. Wiping sweat off his face, he realized he could only enter the dark side from outside his actual room. He scanned the area, noting it felt just like the real world. Walking down the street, frustration building, a shadow popped up next to him. The shadow lunged at him like it had something to prove. The shadow loomed over him. A chill ran down his spine. Was that a person, or something worse? He turned, wondering if the shadow was here to help or not. This shadow was not like his huge sharp teeth, not exactly friendly. It carried a scythe, eyes gleaming with bad intentions. Caught off guard, he cursed as the shadow lunged at him. Luckily, he dodged just in time. The shadow paused, its eerie eyes locking onto him. The shadow kept attacking, but Jianyu was on point, dodging and swearing under his breath. He summoned his shadow circle, hoping it'd be his escape route. With the shadow hot on his heels, he dove straight into the circle. He passed through the void again, like an unscheduled pit stop. He landed back in his room, face first. Ouch. He checked himself out, pants slashed, skin safe, but that attack was way too close. Freaked out, he wondered what the shadow was, why the gate appeared, and why he was suddenly a target. He checked the grazes on the rest of his body. Lucky for him, all that training made him flexible enough to dodge most of the damage. Grabbing a metal chair, he wasn't about to go down easy. Calling the shadow an idiot, he vowed no mercy for the next round. January 28th, first fight with the shadow. Spoiler alert, he got hit. January 29th, round 2 for revenge failed again. A hit to the chest, nearly broken ribs, but the curse to get back at the shadow was still on. January 30th, 3 scratches on the butt. Painful and a hit to his HP. Just another day in the life. January 31st, recovering at home, with Lu Yaoyao playing nurse. She was seriously worried though. Lu Yaoyao asked if he'd been fighting. He casually brushed it off, claiming scars were a man's badge of honor. Lu Yaoyao grinned, teasing if scars on his butt counted as manly, then pressed on his wounds, causing him to yelp in pain. She pointed out that he still felt pain but had gotten cocky since his body started getting stronger. He suddenly remembered to ask what she was planning, with just a month left. Lu Yaoyao was a little lost. 1 month left for what? He reminded her about the martial arts exam coming up, checking if she remembered too. That year, most industries tanked, especially culture and art. Artists became society's least popular crowd. Forget entertainment, everyone was focused on national affairs. The night guards became the new stars. To join the night guard, you had to pass the state's martial arts exam. Pass it, and your life would be anything but ordinary. Back at his place, Lu Yaoyao was still on injury duty. Lu Yaoyao admitted she didn't want to take the martial arts exam. Jianyu was caught off guard. She hesitated, lips pursed. After a moment, she gathered the courage to admit she wanted to learn music, not fight. He shrugged, telling her if she wanted to learn, go ahead. He wondered if Uncle Lee would be cool with it, though. In his mind, he shook his head. Uncle Lee, senior exec in the Night Watch, probably wouldn't be thrilled. He was the type who played it by the book. As she was about to apply ointment, she paused, hearing his question. She clarified it wasn't that Uncle Lee disagreed, leaving Jianyu confused. He realized she hadn't told anyone and pointed it out. She shrugged, explaining that the laws had changed. She said that now, as long as you met the qualifications, everyone had to take the martial arts exam, no exceptions. Jianyu was surprised. It used to be that even average students could apply for the general exam. Now, not so much. She explained that with the night watch under more pressure, she'd be taking the exam for sure unless something crazy happened. Jianyu remembered the tiny instruments she'd brought out the other day, almost making noise almost. He figured the test day would be full of tricky details he couldn't hide, but at least the night guard wouldn't need to rely on guns. He nervously hoped his clueless guide wouldn't land him in the wrong group. Then, a light bulb flickered in his head. He asked if Lu Yaoyao's reagents could prevent alien species. She explained they only detected aliens, advising him to run and call for help if facing a truly different kind. He double-checked, and she confirmed it was a different breed entirely. He went quiet, visibly stressed, and she raised an eyebrow, curious. Lu Yaoyao told Jianyu her injuries were healed and she would leave. He cleared his throat, reluctantly mentioning her family's knowledge of the paranormal and asking to see it. Lu Yaoyao asked if he planned to take the public exam, and Jianyu reminded her the martial arts exam was mandatory that year, advising him to prepare if he had talent. Lu Yaoyao doubted Jianyu, leaning in to ask. Startled, he assured her it was true, adding he planned to create a comic about superhumans and alien blood. Her eyes lit up, eager for the details. Jianyu was caught off guard. He hadn't expected her to get this excited over a random comment. Jianyu told Lu Yaoyao about Ben, a bullied boy with a kind heart, chosen by the Night's Watch for the Super Warrior Project with help from a classmate, teacher, and aunt. Ben transformed with extraordinary power, injected with the Super Soldier Serum, becoming the powerful leader Captain Ben. Jianyu explained that the Night Watchman kept Captain Ben at gatherings, meeting elites, until an alien species invaded the city, bringing a powerful pink skull and a blue cosmic cube. Lu Yaoyao was hooked, and Jianyu was having way too much fun telling the story. She led him into a room, gesturing for him to follow. Her house, just down the lane from his, became his temporary base while she ran off to fetch materials from her dad's room. Jianyu scanned the room. His eyes wandered over the displayed items in the house. Then, something caught his eye. A book with an intriguing cover. He picked it up, saw it was Destiny Space, a manga about sibling love, and couldn't help but ask how she dared to read that. Flustered, Lu Yaoyao grabbed the book back, claiming it was just left by a friend and that she never read it. She told him to stay put and not touch her stuff as she left the room. He agreed, telling her to go ahead. He thought to himself that Lu Yaoyao was as carefree as ever, never suspicious of anyone. Seeing the guitar, he remembered Lu Yaoyao's childhood love for music and how she insisted he listen, despite his lack of interest, refusing to throw away the old things. Jianyu hit play on the cassette, and music blared out, filling the room. The music hit, and Jianyu couldn't help but think back to all the memories with Lu Yaoyao. A smile crept up as he closed his eyes, until a voice interrupted, asking when he got into music. Rubbing his eyes, Jianyu realized he must have dozed off. Lu Yaoyao, ever the critic, pointed out that he probably couldn't even name the instruments. Lu Yaoyao tossed him a VR headset, catching him off guard, but he caught it like a pro. She assured him everything was set up, time to check it out. Jianyu slapped the VR headset on, covering his eyes like a pro gamer. The VR buzzed to life, signaling it was ready. He sat still, waiting for the virtual world to load, wondering what weirdness awaited. Out of nowhere, a massive force yanked him into a vortex. Moments later, Jianyu blinked to open his eyes, confused. He found himself floating in the void, a swarm of eyes staring back. Looking around, he wondered if he was in the abyss. This VR felt way too real. The abyss, he remembered, was full of danger and taboos, the source of all kinds of chaos. Alien species born there were savage, constantly wreaking havoc on their own world. Sinister shadows lurked ahead. Were those alien species the same ones he saw at the hospital? He noticed a crack ahead, recalling that the abyss was linked to their world through a shadow layer, the dark side. Aliens slipped in through these cracks, despite the Night Guardian's efforts. He stepped through the crack in space, unsure of what was on the other side. Suddenly, he was transported to a new place. It looked like a city, and he realized the shadow layer reset every 2 months, recreating whatever they were seeing. Alien numbers spiked, and action was needed fast. But strong people weren't advised to enter, as the shadow layer distorted vision 3.5 meters of visibility, and that increased with strength. Jianyu noticed the pollution in the shadow layer, thinking humans could turn into strange entities if exposed too long. He wondered why Kai Tong felt no discomfort when entering earlier. Out of nowhere, a massive shadow loomed behind Jianyu, its form muscular and menacing. Alarmed, Jianyu spun around to face the threat. Just as he tensed, a beam of light from the sky struck the shadow. A massive flash of light went off, catching the attention of nearby shadows. Jianyu quickly raised his arm, shielding himself from the blast's dust and debris. Out of nowhere, someone dropped a truth bomb to beat aliens. You need power that matches theirs. A faceless figure appeared, glowing with fiery energy, spouting about being extraordinary to handle aliens. Jianyu drooled, amazed by the figure, asking if its extraordinariness was due to handsomeness, and if passing the martial arts exam would give him a chance to look like that. The figure ignored Jianyu, continuing to rant about how extraordinary people were basically aliens with human bodies. As it spoke, a black substance began to consume the faceless figure, like it was being slowly eaten by its own power. The black goo merged with the figure, creeping into its form. The figure, now engulfed in darkness, declared that extraordinary people were always battling pollution and alienation. The black goo slithered as the figure explained that after an extraordinary person died, they often turned into something else heterogeneous. The figure's hands morphed into monstrous claws. Jianyu, wide-eyed, listened as the figure ominously claimed that extraordinary people should burn out their strength before death. The figure morphed into a giant shadow monster, towering over Jianyu like a nightmare. Then, everything plunged into darkness. Freaked out, Jianyu ripped the VR off his face, catching Lu Yaoyao off guard. Lu Yaoyao asked what went down, but Jianyu waved it off, claiming it was just a lot of info and the system hadn't updated in a while. Jianyu asked for a back massage, earning an annoyed "what?" from Lu Yaoyao. He quickly promised her 3 Ultra HD drawings to pick from. Lu Yaoyao agreed, though not exactly thrilled about it. While massaging, she asked why his neck was so hard. Jianyu explained it was from working out. Lu Yaoyao then asked about his abs, prompting him to offer a touch. While Lu Yaoyao eagerly inspected Jianyu's abs, the door suddenly burst open. Uncle Lu stormed in, fiery energy radiating from him as he glared at the scene. Moments later, they were all awkwardly seated at the dinner table. Jianyu nervously glanced at Uncle Lu between bites. Jianyu froze as Uncle Lu bared his teeth at him mid-chew, his nerves skyrocketing. Lu Yaoyao slid a piece of meat into Uncle Lu's bowl, trying to clear up his misunderstanding. Uncle Lu shot her a look, asking if his own eyes could be wrong. Lu Yaoyao was speechless. Embarrassed, she quickly pushed Jianyu into the spotlight. Jianyu almost slipped up, calling Uncle Lu Dad, but quickly corrected himself, blaming himself and offering to punish himself with 3 cups. Uncle Lu and Lu Yaoyao stared, horrified, as Jianyu downed his drink, then told Uncle Lu to go ahead, he'd already done his part. Uncle Lu, veins popping, grunted in agreement, clearly not buying it. He flipped the table, praising Jianyu's bravery, then asked Lu Yaoyao where the knife was. Jianyu, fleeing, quickly told Uncle Lu it was a misunderstanding, recalling the past. Jianyu thought about how, despite their childhood bond, he and Lu Yaoyao were total opposites. While others saw him as a troublemaker, Lu Yaoyao was the picture of grace and education. Still, for some weird reason, she always enjoyed hanging out with him. She'd even challenge him to pea shooting contests, just to see whose went farther. Jianyu figured it was either because he'd once helped her or maybe she just liked to glorify his bravery and good looks. Like that time he stood up to 2 bullies just to protect her. She cried behind him, watching the scene unfold. Jianyu went head-to-head with the bullies, feeling like a hero. He remembered how, even when he played the homeless prank and did ridiculous things, she was always up for it. Uncle Lu would scold him for his lies even as a kid, while someone would clean Lu Yaoyao's face and warn her not to hang out with him again. Uncle Lu sat in the living room, with Lu Yaoyao standing before him. He thought Uncle Lu wouldn't allow them to be together, making him constantly wary of him. Uncle Lu shot them both a death stare, still fuming. He was about to light a cigarette, probably to add more drama to the moment. But out of nowhere, it was Lu Yaoyao glaring now. Uncle Lu was left speechless as Lu Yaoyao snatched the cigarette from his mouth, like a plot twist no one saw coming. Uncle Lu turned his glare to Jianyu, demanding to know what in the world he was doing back. Nervously, Jianyu tried to act all official, claiming he was just looking up info on aliens and supernatural beings. Uncle Lu shot a quick look at Lu Yaoyao, silently asking for backup. Lu Yaoyao shot a playful look away, laughing mischievously while pulling a goofy face. Uncle Lu sighed, shaking his head at how spoiled Lu Yaoyao had become. His tone shifted, turning serious as he focused on Jianyu. Uncle Lu asked if Jianyu knew why the government kept students in the dark about certain things. Jianyu shrugged, admitting he wasn't sure. Uncle Lu explained that human souls could be unstable, and too much despair could lead someone into the abyss, which is why some things shouldn't be shared with everyone. Jianyu listened closely as Uncle Lu added that not everyone had the strength of will to handle such knowledge. He warned that even a tiny crack in the soul could be exploited by alien races. Uncle Lu said qualification tests were necessary, ensuring only the physically and mentally strong could interact with the supernatural world. Jianyu's concern grew as Uncle Lu mentioned that the superpower path was full of dangers and required patience and perseverance. Uncle Lu warned Jianyu that, even with gadgets, people still lost control of their powers every year, and advised him to stay away from it, asking if he understood. Jianyu nodded, thanking Uncle Lu for the advice. However, he added that the military exam was unavoidable, and that it was better to rely on himself than others, especially if the world went south. A reliable ally would be key. Uncle Lu opened his mouth to scold Jianyu, but was interrupted by a ringing phone. Answering the call, the voice on the other end addressed him as Commander, and reported a Shadow-tier urgent mission. Uncle Lu quickly confirmed and said he'd head out immediately. With a menacing glare, Uncle Lu reminded Jianyu to behave, saying that if he messed up, it'd be a one-way ticket to trouble. Jianyu reassured Uncle Lu, promising no more trouble with Lu Yaoyao, which made her cough in disbelief. Lu Yaoyao pinched his cheeks, asking what he meant by again when they'd never done anything wrong, raising an eyebrow to see if he was serious. Meanwhile, the city's civilians leisurely strolled the streets, enjoying their day. One kid, in particular, was loving his sugar-coated fruit skewer. Somewhere, a monitor displayed the Sunset Watch and its members. Jianyu, meanwhile, walked into a grocery store, grabbing random items off the shelves while wishing he could dig deeper into the info, only settling for the basics. He sighed, thinking that with Uncle Lu's personality, that info would probably be locked away forever. He figured that info would be hidden away, probably never to be seen again. While shopping, Jianyu was caught off guard when his phone suddenly rang. It was Lu Yaoyao calling, instructing him to grab eggs and milk. She started to say more but quickly changed her mind, settling on just those. Moments later, Jianyu found himself in the aisle with pads, looking a bit confused. He grabbed two, thinking if Lu Yaoyao needed pads, she could have just asked without all the hesitation. After a while, Jianyu was heading home, his thoughts still buzzing. With a month left until school, he thought the shadow training was showing progress, but he needed more. He figured that just shadow training wouldn't cut it, and some real practice was definitely needed. On the other hand, Jianyu considered, the fight against aliens was getting more hype lately. Plus, the martial arts exam had more students signing up this year. Jianyu glanced up at the sky. Dark clouds swallowed the moon, and he had a bad feeling something was about to go down. He stretched, deciding it was better to focus on fighting aliens and evolving through battle, rather than overthinking it. Jianyu scanned his surroundings, alert. A dark aura swirled at his feet as he summoned it. The aura expanded, creeping around him. In an instant, Jianyu was swallowed by the dark side. His health bar popped up at 14%, and Jianyu tensed, clearly on edge. He stiffened, hearing footsteps ahead. A shadowy figure emerged, walking straight toward him. The man was in bad shape, holes dotted his body like a ragged doll. His eyes were vacant, and his face was starting to crumble, like it was falling apart. Instinctively, Jianyu took a step back as the man approached. He recognized the man from his building, wondering why he was here like this. Without warning, the man collapsed to the ground. Jianyu stood there, speechless, watching the man in front of him. He kept his guard up, unsure about the guy. His focus remained on the man, constantly checking his health bar. Out of nowhere, Jianyu spotted two kids behind the man, with a shadow floating ominously nearby. It was that same shadow he'd been battling, now with just 24% health left. That definitely caught Jianyu off guard. The shadow lingered, its eerie stare locking onto Jianyu. Anger flashed across Jianyu's face as he silently wondered if the shadow was the cause of all this. Earlier, a man walked down the street, clearly exhausted, venting about his work. He ranted about the endless work in the night department, which he thought would be easy money only to end up working late every night. He regretted signing up for the military exam. Suddenly, he noticed slithering shadows and the faint sound of someone crying for help. The shadows were dragging two kids, their terrified screams piercing the air. The man panicked, wondering if it was aliens pulling people into the dark side. But he quickly dismissed the thought, how would they even sneak into this world? The kids, filled with desperation, reached out, silently begging for help. The man sprang into action, leaping forward without hesitation. Reaching out, he told them to hold on as he tried to grab their hands. He succeeded, gripping their hands tightly. But before he could react, he was yanked into the dark portal with them. Teeth clenched, he braced himself. Fear washed over his face as he realized the gravity of the situation. Moments later, they landed in the dark side. The man lay trembling, while the boy asked where they were, and the girl cried. Realizing he was just a civilian without any gear, the man felt the weight of his mistake. This was basically a death sentence. Out of nowhere, a shadow loomed toward them, sending the kids into another round of terrified screams. The man gritted his teeth, glaring fiercely at the approaching shadow. With a swift kick, he shoved the shadow aside, his desperation fueling his strength. Another swift kick, and the shadow disintegrated into nothing. As the kids checked out the bits of shadow near them, the man inspected the portal, realizing the crack was gone, no going back now. He stayed quiet, deep in thought. Alien races were everywhere, ready to strike at any time. Meanwhile, he realized he'd forgotten basic fighting skills after so much desk work. With the crying kids behind him, it hit him this was worse, they had no fighting chance. The kids bawled, begging to go home. The man figured the only choice was to send a distress signal and wait for rescue. His watch beeped, sending out the distress signal. He handed the watch to the girl, assuring her it'd help with the pollution and that he'd figure out how to get them all home. The man figured the kids needed the device more, and whether they'd survive, well, that was up to fate. The girl held the watch, calming down, while the boy asked if they'd really be going home. As a shadow lurked behind him, the man flashed a smile, telling the kids to hide and wait for the rescue team. The shadow lunged at him, and he waved it off, saying he had a small issue to deal with first. Flashbacks hit him at 18, he passed the military strength exam and joined the university's superpowers department. In his first year, he worked hard to build his foundation, aiming to become a top fighter. By his second year, with a little help from his teachers, he defeated an unclassified alien. He beamed with pride until he turned and saw the shadow. His pride quickly turned to horror, as he realized his efforts were nowhere near enough. Watching his friends defeat massive monsters, he realized hard work didn't matter in the world of superpowers. Natural talent was everything. Out of breath, he wrapped up his workout. Despite his disbelief in fate, he couldn't push past his limits. Depressed, he switched from the military forces to the Department of Morals, becoming just another Night's Watch employee. Back in the present, he wrapped his fists, gearing up for a fight. He shifted from side to side, loosening up for the battle ahead. Ready to face the shadow, he steeled himself. The shadow had 4 eyes, 4 limbs, and a semi-animal form. It was an advanced middle-class first level. This wasn't going to be easy. The shadow screeched, showing off a strange piece of meat tucked in its mouth. The man froze, horrified by the sight. The meat hit the ground with a dull thud. The shadow lunged, and the man greeted it with a punch. With a quick move, he shifted his body, twisting away. He sprang into the air, delivering a solid uppercut to the shadow. The shadow howled as his fist landed squarely on its face. A grin spread across his face finally. The familiar rush was back. But then, something caught his eye, and his excitement turned to alarm. The shadow's arm stretched out, slamming him into a wall with a massive crash. Kneeling, he gasped as the shadow pulled back its arm. Frustration hit him. His mind was one step ahead, but his body was lagging behind. The shadow shot forward, its speed catching him off guard. He dodged left, right, and everywhere in between, barely keeping up. Out of breath, he felt his body grow heavier, like needles were piercing his skin with every step. Finally, he stopped running, turning to face the shadow head-on. Fist clenched, he knew it was time to end this fight. No more stalling. With a sharp swing, he channeled his energy, ready to strike. He unleashed his move Shadow Power, blindness hitting the shadow hard. The shadow let out an agonized scream. He launched himself up again, smashing Shadow Power, blindness right into its face. As he sighed, he realized he was breathing out dark energy, pollution levels rising. He gritted his teeth. Every use of his powers just made the pollution worse. Lucky for him, after becoming an employee, he didn't use them much anymore. The shadow roared in fury, clearly not a fan of his moves. The shadow charged, and he met it halfway. Today, he wasn't holding back. The shadow unexpectedly dodged, slipping to the side like it knew what was coming. The shadow groaned in frustration. It swung, landing a solid punch to his stomach. He was shoved back, stumbling toward the ground. He twisted mid-fall, somehow managing to land on his feet instead of face first. Blood spilled from his mouth as he glared, unable to believe what he was seeing. The shadow lunged again, and he cursed. How was it adapting so fast? A martial arts student could have taken it out with one hand, right? He blocked another hit, realizing maybe the difference was talent. He couldn't keep up. Despite everything, he couldn't back down. Being a night cop meant standing his ground. The kids were shaking nearby. He had no choice but to wait for backup. Blood splattered suddenly, catching him off guard. His eyes widened in shock. His teeth clenched as a sharp pain stabbed through his shoulder. The shadow's blade dug deeper, slamming him into the ground with brutal force. Lying there, he thought about waiting for his fellow night cops to rescue him. Staring at the shadow, he couldn't help but wonder if this was the end. His mind flashed to when he was 15, witnessing a relative's death at the hands of strangers. He dug through his memories, recalling how he joined the military forces at 18. At 20, he remembered being forced out of the combat department, halfway through his second year. By 21, he joined the night police, living the ordinary life of a trainee, facing challenges but still just another cog in the wheel. After a century of humans versus monsters, he realized it wasn't as peaceful as they made it seem. Some just ran from the chaos. How could anyone see hope with black clouds blocking out the sun? A dark smile crossed his face. Death was just a regular part of life for those with powers. He reached into his pocket, pulling something out. It was a blue pill. He popped it in, thinking it might just be the last thing he'd do before death came knocking. His eyes glowed with dark energy. No way was he letting that flute go. Blood dripped from his mouth, but he just thought, that shadow's a real pain. He stood tall, unleashing a massive wave of dark energy as he prepared for round 2. A wicked grin spread across his face. Round 2 was about to get real. Full of determination, he mentally hyped himself up. Let's go. He was so ready. The shadow lunged, but he was already bracing for impact. A battle cry escaped, a final pump before the clash. The shadow sliced through the air, but he was already airborne, dodging with ease. Mid-jump, he landed a solid kick to the shadow's face. The shadow staggered back as he landed, ready for more. His fist wrapped in energy, ready for the next blow. Another shout, then punches one after another, landing with power. Punching away, he pushed himself. He'd hold on just a little longer. His vision blurred, his body slowing, but he wasn't stopping. He could barely move, but he was determined to keep going. His fist froze mid-air, his body giving up. He froze, his body shaking and barely staying upright. The shadow's punch hit him square in the face, sending him flying. He slammed into the wall, then hit the ground with a painful thud. Lying there with blood pooling behind his head, he realized his own power was taking him down. Gritting his teeth, he accepted it. He couldn't win, he was helpless. He thought his boring life was over, but the sound of footsteps caught his attention. Jianyu appeared, calling out to the shadow like it was a kid who didn't wait their turn. The man initially thought Jianyu was a night watchman but doubted it upon hearing his youthful voice and speech. He then wondered if Jianyu could be an ordinary person, which seemed impossible. Jianyu helped him sit up against the wall, telling him to rest. He's got this. He remembered how tightly the dark side was controlled. No one could just waltz in, so how was Jianyu here? Maybe Jianyu was some secret powerful figure until the shadow punched him across the room. Jianyu hit the ground hard. Totally shocked, he thought, wait, this guy's weak? While he was distracted, the shadow raised its blade, ready to strike. Then, out of nowhere, a hand shot up to slap the shadow. The shadow took the slap like it was nothing, but it was still a solid hit. The slap landed, and the shadow's health dropped to 23%. Ouch. Of course, it was Jianyu, now completely furious. With 73% health, Jianyu pointed a soy sauce bottle at the shadow, still calling it little boy like it was some schoolyard fight. The green moon hung high, marking the evening on the dark side. Jianyu was dodging the shadow's attacks with ease. He looked like he was having fun. He waved the soy sauce bottle like it was his weapon of choice. He swung it hard, breaking the bottle over the shadow's head. Meanwhile, the shadow lifted its blade, ready for round 2. The shadow swung, but Jianyu dodged with ease, then zipped behind it. He took the chance to stab the shadow with the broken bottle. As the shadow slashed, Jianyu dodged without breaking a sweat, all while taunting it about their past battles. He poked at the shadow, calling out how injured it was. Its speed was slower, and it should be afraid. The shadow screamed, clearly in pain. It backed off, speechless and clearly rattled. Watching, the man couldn't decide if Jianyu was a genius or just really lucky. No tricks, but somehow he was taking down the shadow. Jianyu mentioned the time the shadow cut him. Payback was coming, and he was ready to end this. But then, Jianyu's eyes went wide in surprise. The shadow's tail slammed into his stomach, catching him off guard. Jianyu slammed into the wall, cursing from the impact. Out of breath, he muttered about being careless, blaming the shadow's obsession with his backside. The shadow didn't miss a beat, charging toward him once more. Seeing the trembling kids behind him, Jianyu weighed his options, knowing he'd be done in 2 hits, but maybe, just maybe, he could get away. Running away for a few days to heal wasn't his thing, though. That wasn't how he rolled. Holding the bottle tight, he realized the shadow had only 20% health left, but he was still scared. This was going to be a rough one. As the shadow charged, the man shouted a tip aimed for the right rib. It was wounded. Jianyu zigzagged, signaling he got the message. The shadow was thrown off by Jianyu's sudden move. A grin spread across Jianyu's face, like he was already ahead. He kept swerving to keep the shadow guessing his next move. Finally, he struck the shadow's right rib, just like the man said. The shadow screamed as its health dropped to 18%. The shadow bolted, still howling in pain. Jianyu blinked, surprised the shadow was actually running. The man, alarmed, saw the shadow rush past him. The man quickly realized the shadow's target, and shouted for Jianyu to move fast. The shadow was headed straight for the unconscious kids. The man yelled that the shadow was after the kids, its terrifying mouth ready to devour them. The shadow lunged toward the kids hiding nearby. Its mouth opened wide, a horrifying sight as it neared the kids. Tears filled the boy's eyes as he did his best to shield the girl in his arms. He braced himself, eyes shut, as the shadow's sharp teeth drew near, but someone shouted for it to stop. It was Jianyu, his arms bulging with tension. He swung his arms with all his might, holding a can of drink like it was a weapon. The can whizzed through the air, spinning like it was in a race. He tossed it right at the shadow, aiming to save the kids. The shadow flinched, surprised by the can flying its way. Just in time, the shadow swerved to avoid the can. Meanwhile, the man gritted his teeth, seeming to find some second wind. With a leap, the man kicked the shadow from above, a move straight out of a movie. The shadow yelped in pain as the man's kick landed. The kick sent the shadow flying, still howling, while the man collapsed after his strike. His health bar dropped to 15%, looking rough. Blood trickled from his mouth, but he still talked about saving the kids. The shadow, absolutely furious, let out another scream. It charged, ready to finish the man off while he was down. Just as it neared the man, the shadow screamed in pain, a hand gripping its forehead. Jianyu, looking furious, yanked the shadow by its hair. With a scowl, he promised the shadow he'd finish it off, maybe even bite its neck for good measure. The shadow's health dropped to 14%, The end was near. Grabbing its hair, Jianyu slammed the shadow's head into the ground. As he pinned the shadow down, he taunted it about its alien nature while landing blow after blow. The shadow's health plummeted to 11%. It wasn't looking good. He paused for a moment to ask how the shadow did cannibalism, but then noticed its chest glowing. Upon closer inspection, Jianyu spotted a glowing core on its chest, wondering what it was. Jianyu sharpened his fingers into a point, raising them high. The shadow screamed in agony as Jianyu drove his hand into it. His hand pierced the core, releasing a surge of energy. With a final shout, he declared he was ending the shadow for good. Jianyu kept the shadow pinned, but the thing was throwing some serious energy back. The energy from both of them clashed, like two supercharged batteries. There was a massive explosion that sent the shadow's head flying. Talk about a dramatic exit. Covered in blood, Jianyu coughed, looking like he'd just been through a battle royale. Out of nowhere, a piece of debris started to shift on the floor. Just another Tuesday, right? The dark energy around him made everything shift and move, like it was cleaning up after itself. Even the walls were getting a makeover, with boxes neatly stacked back up like nothing happened. The floor fixed itself as little bits of debris scuttled into the cracks like they had a purpose. The man and kids were out cold, sitting together like they were taking an accidental nap. Jianyu, covered in blood, decided it was time for a quick hair fix. A smile spread across his face as he thought about getting sweet revenge for his troubles. Suddenly, his vision started to blur. Maybe the blood loss was kicking in. Next thing he knew, Jianyu was on the floor, unsure if he was going to nap or pass out. Confusion crept in as his vision got even blurrier. Eventually, everything faded to complete darkness. Then, boom, fire everywhere, right next to a traffic light. People were out cold, while flames consumed everything, from roads to buildings. The fire was so wild, it looked like it was eating the entire city. Jianyu stood in the chaos, wondering if this was the gathering place and how the heck he even got there. Something caught his eye, and alarm bells went off in his head. Shadows closed in around him, like a bad crowd at a concert. They bared their fangs and charged. Jianyu couldn't help but wonder if they were aliens. Paralyzed, Jianyu just stood there, unable to move as claws came at him from all directions. Before he knew it, some weird energy wrapped around him, like an uninvited guest. In pain, Jianyu screamed as the strange energy started to pull him in like a vacuum. The energy was so intense, it consumed everything around Jianyu, like a black hole on overdrive. 1 second, he was there. The next, both Jianyu and the energy disappeared. Poof. The sun faded, the world twisted, the earth shattered, and somewhere in the shadows, chaos reigned, with a few people shouting in the mix. It was like staring death in the face, but most people had no clue what it actually felt like. Jianyu groaned in pain, slowly coming to as the man asked if he was alive. He weakly raised his hand, signaling him to chill. Once fully awake, Jianyu confirmed he was still alive, relieved it was all just a dream. Looking worried, Jianyu glanced at the defeated shadow, confused about what happened after taking down the alien. He tapped the shadow's forehead and went into shade-eating mode. Smiling, he started absorbing the shadow like it was a snack. Out of nowhere, the man interrupted, asking if he was okay and why he was so quiet. Jianyu froze, unsure what to say. Noticing the man's health bar was at 10%, Jianyu figured he wasn't looking too hot, but the system still gave him a 30-70% chance of survival. The man tapped Jianyu's shoulder, probably to make sure he was still there. The man asked if Jianyu could help him prop up against the wall. They both slumped down against the wall, looking like they were on a well-needed break. Glancing at Jianyu, the man checked if he was really not a night watchman. Jianyu was surprised the man didn't recognize him. Guess he'd mastered the art of being invisible. Of course, the man didn't know him, so Jianyu just admitted he wasn't a night watchman. The man insisted he was definitely not a night watchman. Fighting was tough enough, after all. Laughing, the man joked that not all night guards were that strong. Jianyu, annoyed, wondered if the man even remembered he'd saved him. The man laughed, claiming he was just kidding because, obviously, Jianyu was gorgeous. Still coughing, the man joked that soy sauce was the secret to getting rid of aliens, and Jianyu couldn't help but worry, asking if the man was okay. Jianyu wondered if night guards were always this cheerful, given the man was still cracking jokes in his condition. The man asked Jianyu's university and age. Jianyu answered Beidashiofu, second year, while thinking it best to keep his affairs private, fooling around instead. The man asked if Jianyu was in liberal arts or martial arts, and Jianyu paused, realizing the man was getting way too comfortable with the questions. After a moment, the man decided Jianyu was definitely in martial arts. Liberal arts couldn't handle all this. The man threw a curveball, asking Jianyu for a cigarette, leaving him momentarily speechless. After a quick search, Jiang Yu produced a pokey, offering it to the man, who seemed surprised but wasn't about to turn it down. Without a second thought, Jiang Yu snapped the pokey in half. He handed over the bare stick, telling the man to enjoy it, but the man wasn't having it and shot him an annoyed look, urging him to eat it instead. Jiang Yu mentioned there were more, but they'd been ruined in the chaos, suggesting he could grab some for the man, though the guy just told him to keep them. Moments later, they sat side by side in silence, munching on their pokey sticks like it was the most normal thing ever. Out of nowhere, the man asked if Jiang Yu had ever hunted an alien solo, to which Jiang Yu confirmed it was his first time. The man glanced up at the sky, disbelief written all over his face. Gazing at the moon, the man envied those with martial arts skills, feeling weak and hopeless. He told Jiang Yu that despite his strength, he remained weak, and research was ineffective. Jiang Yu suggested saving energy for the rescue, but the man shrugged it off, saying he just needed someone to talk to. The man joked about civil servants being like cotton wool, plenty of them, but still just fluff in the end. He laughed bitterly, wondering how anyone could resist the overwhelming tide of pollution. Jiang Yu, curious, asked if the man had any regrets, considering he could have gone the liberal arts route instead of being a civil servant tangled up in all this. The man clenched his fist, feeling the weight of his words. He stood up, admitting with frustration that he regretted it all. He screamed, venting about his boring office job, chatting with girls, and training the cute new night watchman. Life seemed good until it all fell apart, and now he was stuck. After spilling his feelings, the man broke down in tears, and Jiang Yu, trying to calm him down, told him he wouldn't make it if he kept stressing. Once the man calmed down, he reassured Jiang Yu that the rescue signal was out, help should be coming soon. Spotting the unconscious boy with the watch, Jiang Yu was instantly concerned and asked about him. Just then, the kid clutched the watch even tighter. Jiang Yu stood up, but the man grabbed his arm, warning him about running into danger. Annoyed, Jiang Yu was told to wait and keep chatting until rescue arrived. Jiang Yu stayed silent, his anxiety clear as he really just wanted to escape, wishing the man would stop talking so he could finally get a break. The man's laughter echoed through the space. The man kept teasing Jiang Yu about his bravery, claiming his intervention had been unexpected, which only made Jiang Yu more annoyed. Jiang Yu forced a smile as the man rambled on about the fight, clearly enjoying his own storytelling. The man grinned, casually asking Jiang Yu to apologize to the head of the supernatural tech department for failing to slay a first-class creature, as if it was no big deal. Jiang Yu just stared, still cringing at the lie he'd had to tell. The man kept going, asking Jiang Yu to pass on his awkward thanks to Deputy Director Huang for her great advice on humility, which, honestly, was hard to digest. Jiang Yu hesitated, asking if he could grab a notebook or wait until he felt better to deliver the awkward messages. The man paused, caught off guard for a second. He shook his head, explaining he'd been holding on to those words for ages and just needed someone to unload on. The man sighed, his mood dipping a little. He suddenly spoke wistfully about Northern Watch Academy, wishing they could turn back time. Then, out of nowhere, he asked for more Pockies, demanding the spicy ones, like his snack game was on another level. Jiang Yu chuckled, saying his taste was next level weird and honestly, spicy stick-flavored Pockies were a unicorn. The man agreed, his voice dropping with a hint of disappointment, but he dropped it. Out of nowhere, a dark energy stirred, heading straight for them. The man pointed, noting a night patrol officer was nearby. Jiang Yu grinned, relieved that help had finally arrived. He grabbed his groceries from earlier, ready to move. Without looking back, he started walking off. The man called out, asking if Jiang Yu wasn't coming along. Jiang Yu shook his head, saying he'd go solo. The man sighed, but it wasn't a surprise. Smiling, he wished Jiang Yu a safe trip, like a goodbye you'd say to a friend leaving the party early. Jiang Yu gave a small nod, acknowledging him. A dramatic silence settled as the man's head drooped, his energy draining. Jiang Yu didn't glance back, while the man's head dropped so low, his necklace made a cameo. Jiang Yu summoned dark energy, ready to head out. Just before leaving, Jiang Yu looked back to make sure the man was still there. The rescuers arrived, reporting to comms that they'd found a night patrol officer and 2 kids with him. Jiang Yu observed as the officers quickly checked the kids' vital signs. When the officer went to check the man's health, his bar was stuck at 10%. The officer shook his head at the others, signaling something wasn't right. Jiang Yu's eyes went wide, catching on to the tension. The man's body began to disintegrate, his health bar ticking down to 9%. Confused, Jiang Yu watched as the man's health bar slowly kept dropping. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Modern medicine should have fixed him up by now. As the officers took the kids, the man kept disintegrating, like it was all happening in slow motion. Just as the dark energy closed in to transport him, his vision blurred. Jian Yu reached out, seeing the officers salute the man as if he'd already passed. Finally, the man's health bar hit 0. A faint smile lingered on the man's face as the light overtook him. That smile was the last thing Jian Yu saw before everything went dark. Jian Yu tried to escape the dark energy, but it was relentless, closing in on him. It kept closing in, stealing his sight. Out of nowhere, Jian Yu was snapped back to reality. Standing there with his hands stretched out, Jian Yu noticed everyone staring, confused. A few muttered about the noisy guy and wondered if he was putting on some kind of show. A melancholic look crossed Jian Yu's face as he stared up at the sky. Nearby, a monitor showed a man speaking to exceptional beings, reminding them of their purpose. Holding a blue pill, the man told them not to give up, even at the end. He urged them to take Compound 3, a pill that maxed their potential though with a 90% chance of dying so the Zhou nation could thrive. Officers lined up as the man promised they'd honor their sacrifice, march forward, and wipe out every strange being. With a bunch of officers in line, the man praised their human strength, claiming they'd transcend the ordinary and shape the future as part of the night observation department. The elevator dinged as it reached the 5th floor. Inside, Jian Yu looked like he just fought a storm and lost. His mind kept circling back to the man. Did he really just die like that? The elevator doors opened, and Jian Yu stepped out. As he walked down the hall, he remembered the man laughing and chatting just before everything changed. After a moment, it hit him the man probably just wanted someone to talk to before the end. Unlocking his door, Jian Yu couldn't help but feel that no flowers, no applause were ever given to the man. He just passed like anyone else. Stepping inside, Jian Yu closed the door behind him. He'd never forget the man, no matter how ordinary his end had seemed. Rubbing his temples, Jian Yu tried to shake off the heavy thoughts. With a sigh, he realized he was wiped out and needed to wash up and crash. He stared at his reflection, shocked to see 55% left on his health bar. He'd felt like he was running on empty. Another sigh. He thought about the man who'd barely flinched with 10% left. Jian Yu still had a long way to go. He grabbed a snack, realizing that maybe just working his body wasn't enough to get back on track. It hit him his willpower had some serious catching up to do. Then, just like that, Jian Yu dropped his food when someone asked about the eggs. It was Lu Yaoyao. Her phone had been on strike, so she couldn't find anyone and was asking if he'd gone to the chicken coop for the eggs. Panicking, Jian Yu quickly hid his bloody jacket, mumbling about the crazy New Year crowds making everyone wait forever. Then, a thought hit him, and he spun around, asking how she even got his house key. Lu Yaoyao jumped off the couch, explaining that since he ordered takeout every day, Uncle Li gave her the key to look after him. Anxiety crept in again as Lu Yaoyao stared him down, asking if someone had hit him outside. Changing the subject, he told her it was late and she needed to sleep, or Uncle Li would start misunderstanding things. Lu Yaoyao ignored him, grabbing his arm and asking him to turn around. He dodged again, saying he was starving and needed to make instant noodles. Lu Yaoyao stopped him, pulling his arm and revealing the torn jacket. Her eyes went wide with concern as she noticed the tear. Jian Yu's hood was pulled down, revealing his injuries, and Lu Yaoyao couldn't help but wonder how he ended up looking like that. Jian Yu changed the subject, but Lu Yaoyao insisted he return and answer where he went. He denied going anywhere, demanding she let go, but she refused unless he told the truth. Jian Yu explained stepping in during a robbery, bashfully asking her not to pity him for beating the thief more. When the police chief arrived, he barely recognized the culprit. Lu Yaoyao stayed quiet, her expression darkening as Jian Yu dramatically showed off his fighting skills, claiming he beat the guy so badly even his mom wouldn't recognize him. Just as Jian Yu was gearing up for another round of bragging, Lu Yaoyao interrupted by gently touching his face. Her concerned gaze had him momentarily speechless. Silence hung in the air as Jian Yu froze, utterly stunned by what just happened. Inside, Jian Yu was mentally screaming, did she actually buy that story? The food he dropped earlier still sat there, untouched. Lu Yaoyao kept her hand on his face, making him feel even more awkward. She broke the silence with a soft question about whether his injuries hurt. Trying to brush it off, Jian Yu claimed it didn't hurt and urged her to go get some rest. Lu Yaoyao stared at him silently, her concern obvious in her gaze. As she walked off, Lu Yaoyao casually mentioned telling Uncle Li about his midnight brawl, leaving Jian Yu caught off guard. Jian Yu rushed to clarify it wasn't fighting, just him doing the right thing, but Lu Yaoyao wasn't having it. She was still determined to tell Uncle Li. Out of nowhere, Jian Yu dropped to the floor, dramatically pretending to collapse, making Lu Yaoyao panic and ask if he was alright. Lu Yaoyao sat beside him, insisting he needed hospital treatment, but Jian Yu casually shrugged it off, saying Uncle Lee had top-tier meds at home that were way better. Lu Yaoyao finally caught on he just wanted her to play nurse. Jian Yu grinned and cheekily called her Dr. Lu, thanking her for the trouble. A minute later, Jian Yu was back to complaining, saying his injuries hurt more now and that he looked worse than before. As Lu Yaoyao bandaged him up, Jian Yu grumbled that she wrapped him up like a mummy. It was a bit over the top. Lu Yaoyao ignored his complaints and playfully smacked his arm, asking if he'd show off next time. Jian Yu quickly promised he wouldn't. She wanted confirmation, but Jian Yu insisted he hadn't sworn. Angry at Jian Yu's answer, she raised her hand. He quickly clarified its human nature to join in, offering to just observe. Unsatisfied, Lu Yaoyao demanded he repeat himself. As Lu Yaoyao kept smacking him, Jian Yu reluctantly confirmed he'd just observe next time, no action involved. As Lu Yaoyao started walking away, Jian Yu cheekily asked if she was really leaving, offering her his big bed for the night. She shot him a playful tongue out and a cheeky face. Lu Yaoyao stepped out, leaving the door to click shut behind her. Alone again, Jian Yu sprawled on the sofa, the silence almost deafening. He suddenly recalled the man's message about guarding the Northern Watch Academy. But then, something hit him, and he stopped mid-thought. Realizing something important, Jian Yu jumped up in alarm. He was immediately distressed, realizing the man never mentioned his name. A glowing orb surrounded by dark energy hummed with strange symbols. The orb released the other symbols, focusing its glow on the third. A system popped up, showing info on the defeated shadow, granting Jian Yu the Shadow Strike ability, extra shadow points, and a sweet deal no cost for his arm fracture. It was well into the evening. Sitting in his living room, Jian Yu pondered if mutant kills would be logged automatically or if he'd need to devour them first. His eye flickered, light rushing toward it like some kind of weird activation. Shaking it off, he focused on his new skill, the Shadow Assault, promising easier weak point attacks and massive damage in the shadows. Rising, Jian Yu stretched, getting ready to test out his new skill in the middle of his living room. Confident, he tried activating the Shadow Assault. But nothing happened. Silence followed. Frustrated, he stomped his feet, wondering if the system was pulling his leg. Then it hit him, maybe the skill needed a target to work? Slumping back, he decided to forget it for now and try again later when he had the chance. A lucky draw wheel popped up, and Jian Yu chose a character, hoping for the best. The system labeled him as a rogue assassin, thriving in shadows, suited perfectly for sneaky kills. Calling the system a cheat, Jian Yu grumbled about how it wrote all the game lines but made him hunt in the shadows instead of the light. The system suddenly notified him that his shadow could now transform, merging with him for a special form. Curious, he clicked on it. The system detailed his shadow form's perk surprise rewards, a hidden aura, stronger abilities, and no vital parts, meaning beheading would only cost health, not his life. Jian Yu's eyes lit up, practically drooling, as he wondered if the cheat code was real, especially the fourth point. It was just too wild. Scrolling further, he saw that the fourth point had more details. If beheaded, his health would drop by 99%, but he'd still live. Annoyed, Jian Yu questioned how the system could still save him, wondering if dying quickly might be the better option. Shaking it off, he decided to test it out, telling himself it was still a solid ability, and commanded his shadow to appear. A dark, gooey mass oozed from the floor. It rose, morphing into Jian Yu's shadow. He stretched out his arm, his finger pointing straight ahead. The shadow mirrored him, extending its left arm. Their index fingers touched, a perfect match. Without warning, the shadow dissolved, fusing into his arm. Concern flickered on his face as the shadow inched up toward his face. Alarmed, he watched as half his face was overtaken. Soon, the entire body was swallowed by the shadow. He examined himself, now merged with the shadow, noting how interesting this form was. Taking a deep breath, he prepared himself. Jian Yu leaped off the floor, shooting forward at lightning speed. He zoomed around the room, leaving only traces of motion behind. Objects flew everywhere as Jian Yu flaunted his speed. Then, with one hand, he effortlessly lifted something. It was his bed, and he casually lifted it up and down with one hand, showing off his strength. A 100 kilograms hammer materialized out of nowhere. He slammed the hammer into himself, testing his defense. Laughing maniacally, he declared the shadow form was honestly incredible. A shout from downstairs snapped him out of it. Someone was asking what the noise was about, and told him to keep it down. He reminded himself to chill out, and dropped the shadow form. Scanning the system, Jian Yu spotted the rogue position and, curious, clicked to activate it. The system told Jian Yu he had partial authority, but activation would fully awaken it, making the position exclusive to him. The system warned of risks and asked if he chose activation. A confirmation screen popped up, reminding him that risks could sometimes lead to big rewards. Jianyu eyed the screen, thinking the new position looked like a good move. He hesitated. Risks could be bad, but they also meant potential rewards. It was a classic dilemma. Out of nowhere, the yes option started glitching. Dark substance began oozing from the screen, freaking Jianyu out. He cursed, realizing he hadn't even selected yet. The dark stuff quickly surrounded him, pulling him in. The floor trembled. No one had a clue what was going on with him. Suddenly, a blinding light flooded his room, visible even from outside his window. After a moment, the trembling stopped. Black substance still steamed from his feet as he stepped back inside, now covered in a glossy black layer. Jianyu's body morphed, and the system officially recognized him as a hunter. The system warned that if he didn't excel in hunting, he'd perish, but since he was a born hunter, his attacks were bound to land, and it had new info for him to check out. First, weapons like guns and bows didn't count. Second, the more mysterious and feared he got, the more rewards would come his way. Third, even gods wouldn't escape his reach. Watching the dark stuff leave his body, Jianyu couldn't help but be impressed. His attacks could even harm gods. His left eye lit up, surprising him. The system told him that activating the shadow form would boost his execution ability, lowering the health required to land a kill. Execution happens when a target's health hits a certain point, and their bar turns red, showing Jianyu exactly where to strike. Hitting that spot would trigger an execution, wiping out the target completely. The health needed for an execution depends on both the target's and Jianyu's strength, abilities, and positioning. Jianyu stood in his living room, staring at the system's notification screen. Reading the execution details, he realized it was the same red spot that appeared during the last monster battle. He briefly mentioned how combining execution with absolute damage would be game-changing. A grin spread across his face as the thought crossed his mind. His excitement surged. He felt unbeatable now. Then, it hit him. Something was off. Without hesitation, he peeled off the bandages. As he inspected his injuries, he realized nothing was as bad as expected. No risks, just smooth sailing. Curious, he poked his arm. His wound was nearly gone. That medicine wasn't supposed to kick in that fast. Out of nowhere, he pulled out some dark residue from his stomach wound. He examined the dark substance, and realized it was from activating his shadow form. The healing power was unreal. Meanwhile, someone scrolled through social media, seeing Jianyu's post about fighting off a villain with 88 knives without flinching. Naturally, they asked Lu Yaoyao if it was true. A girl mentioned Jianyu's fight with traffickers, holding a watermelon knife without hesitation. Lu Yaoyao was speechless, and the man asked if Jianyu was injured and if they should visit him. Exasperated, Lu Yaoyao told them not to believe Jianyu, who had just been chased by a dog. The two were shocked and confirmed if it was true. In her head, Lu Yaoyao sighed. Jianyu was at it again, bragging. A short while later, they stood outside Jianyu's house. Lu Yaoyao, feeling smug, told them to see for themselves if they didn't believe her. She grabbed the key and was ready to open the door. Just then, one of her friends asked how she got her hands on Jianyu's house key. Nervously, she explained that Jianyu's uncle had given it to her. Her friends bought it. As soon as she stepped inside, she called out for Jianyu, but instead of an answer, she was greeted with a loud scream. Jianyu was crouched by the bed, clutching his stomach. His stomach wound reopened, and he realized he'd underestimated it. Lu Yaoyao asked if he was okay. As they entered, Lu Yaoyao asked where his bandage was and why he'd taken it off. Jianyu said he thought it was healed, so he removed it. Their friends were stunned. One girl commented that it seemed Jianyu's post was legit, and the boy agreed, confirming it. Out of nowhere, the boy grabbed Jianyu, marveling at his muscles, while the girl poked him, impressed by his strength. Lu Yaoyao pushed them away, ordering them to sit in the living room. The two quickly agreed, begging her not to push them. The door slammed shut as they sat down, making sure not to anger her again. The guy asked if Jianyu and Lu Yaoyao were still an item. She shrugged, probably. As the medicine was applied, Jianyu sighed, clearly not enjoying the process. Lu Yaoyao rolled her eyes, telling him to cut the drama since the medicine didn't sting that bad. Jianyu froze, eyes locked on Lu Yaoyao's legs as she sat by his bed. Blushing, Jianyu zoned out, his brain stuck on those legs while she scolded him for opening his wound. Totally distracted, Jianyu couldn't even hear her, too busy staring at her legs, something she definitely caught onto. Lu Yaoyao joked about having Xiao Peng do the job instead, but Jianyu quickly protested, claiming the chubby guy was too clumsy. Lu Yaoyao gave him a look, clearly trying to figure out if he was serious. Pinching his cheeks, Lu Yaoyao commented that Uncle Li must have neglected him. Jianyu disagreed, saying even 800 rounds of care wouldn't help. She asked about his day yesterday, but made it clear she wasn't buying any robbery stories. Jianyu tried to save face, claiming he was the ultimate knight in shining armor. Lu Yaoyao mocked him, asking if he could speak truth. Jianyu thought there was no point in explaining, as she wouldn't believe he killed a mutant or spoke with the Night Watch. Switching gears, Jianyu asked about Uncle Li's return. Lu Yaoyao shot back that he hadn't, curious about why it mattered. Jianyu mentioned how tough being a night watchman must be, with all the daytime work, nighttime shifts, and dangers. Lu Yaoyao raised an eyebrow at his remark but kept her thoughts to herself. Jianyu studied her, guessing she was always worried about Uncle Lu. He figured that most night watch folks probably didn't have peaceful lives. He mentioned Uncle Li's missing arm and Lin Mo's tragic death at 20 as examples. Jianyu reflected that even tough guys like Uncle Li could be held back by serious injuries. Out of nowhere, Lu Yaoyao asked if Jianyu would consider joining the Night Watch after passing the martial arts exam. Jianyu paused, noticing the concern in her eyes. He stayed quiet for a bit, thinking it over. Lu Yaoyao was confused when Jianyu admitted he had no clue about it. Her face twisted into disdain as Jianyu casually asked if there were any cute girls in the Night Watch. Lu Yaoyao pinched his cheeks, telling him to shut up as Jianyu squirmed and begged her to stop. Behind the door, their friends listened, giggling as Jianyu begged Lu Yaoyao to be gentle. She teased him, suggesting she'd show him how it's done. He quickly protested, but they weren't fooled. Zhao Peng asked about Jianyu and Lu Yaoyao, but the girl dodged, tossing the question back to him with a sly grin. An awkward silence fell as Jianyu and Lu Yaoyao stared at their friends, both wishing they could disappear. Jianyu, covered in marks, finally broke the tension, asking how they even ended up here. Zhao Peng shrugged, saying they didn't hear what he told them yesterday, so they had to check it out. The girl asked if Jianyu was alright. They noticed the marks on his arms and wondered aloud if they were hickeys. Guess Lu Yaoyao was really forgiving. Seeing their worried faces, Jianyu reassured them he wasn't about to die and invited them to sit. While sitting with Jianyu, he bragged, but as he returned from the supermarket, a big man passed by, and Lu Yaoyao distantly expressed annoyance at his showing off again. Lu Yaoyao casually mentioned seeing his torn clothes at the supermarket and suggested he throw them away already. Still bragging, Jianyu agreed to toss the clothes and kept on about how 80 big men had popped out of the woods, and he was swinging his knife like a hero. Then, Jianyu froze, suddenly remembering something important. Lu Yaoyao was confused as Jianyu lunged at her, urgently mentioning there was more in those clothes. As they stood there, the item slipped from his hands and fell to the floor. Silence hung in the air as they realized the item was a pack of sanitary pads. Lu Yaoyao glared, questioning why he'd even brought those. Jianyu awkwardly explained he remembered her stomach hurting, so he thought he'd be sweet and bring her a gift. Zhao Peng watched, thinking only couples close enough would do this, while the girl snapped a pic, clearly planning to share it with everyone. Jianyu proudly handed over the pads, offering his services, leaving Lu Yaoyao speechless, her temple twitching. Lu Yaoyao squeezed the pack tight, trying to hold it together. Her face turned bright red as she told him she didn't need it. Without warning, she tossed the pads at him, hitting him right on the forehead. The impact left a bruise, and Jianyu sulked, asking why she was so angry for no reason. Zhao Peng cut in, suggesting it was time to leave, while the girl cheerfully told them they believed in them, confusing Jianyu even more. As they left, Jianyu muttered to himself that now, at least, no one would bother him. Without missing a beat, he summoned his shadow, ready for the next thing. Dark energy swirled up from the floor again. Jianyu called for the dark shadow, and energy gathered toward him. The energy merged with him, darkening the left side of his face and eyes. He decided it was time for a fun workout session. The dark energy swallowed him up, pulling him into the floor. He found himself in the dark side, now in his shadow form. Upon opening his eyes, he couldn't help but feel oddly at ease in a place that should be full of pollution. It felt like someone used to industrial pollution suddenly stepped into wide, open plains. With his health at 60%, he noticed his stomach didn't hurt anymore and felt much better. He got ready to start his workout. Without warning, he dropped to the floor. Then he pushed himself back up. He was shocked to push himself so high he nearly hit the ceiling. After bouncing off the ceiling, he crashed back down. Laughing, he felt like he had infinite strength. He started doing push-ups so intense, he was literally lifting off the ground, hitting 104 reps in no time. The system buzzed, telling him that his dark form made him feel completely liberated, like freedom in its purest form. The system noted he was getting serious with the workout. As he exercised, the Dark Devour ability kicked in. His shadow points and physical strength got a slight boost. The system kept tracking his progress, noting his strength was inching up. It recorded the gradual increase in his strength as he powered through. After a bit, he stood up, casually saying he nailed 1,000 push-ups. Noticing how cramped it was, he figured it was time to take his exercise outside. Moments later, he found himself back on the streets, near a playground. He wondered if anyone would rush to be his disciple if this were real life. Out of nowhere, he grabbed the pull-up bar. He spun on the bar like a gymnast, deciding right then he'd be the world champion of horizontal bar exercises. Back at Night Watch headquarters, a group of employees walked down the hall, all business, their faces set. They rushed into a conference room where Uncle Lou and others were already waiting. They jumped into the report, saying the dark layers fluctuations were way off, and pollution levels were rising fast, spreading out. Squads B3, B7, A2, and others had found similar cracks all over north, south, east. The lady added that the fluctuations were odd, especially concentrated in residential areas on the map. Uncle Lou's anxiety showed as she pointed out how the pattern had changed from random to focused. The Night Watch team exchanged grim looks as the report sank in. Uncle Lou was thinking how these strange happenings were becoming all too common lately. Scanning a file with Lin Mo's picture, Uncle Lou recalled 4 strange incidents recently where people were pulled into the dark side. The file laid out all the details of Lin Mo's case. It even had images of him in the aftermath. Uncle Lee figured it might be rare now, but no one could predict whether those creepy creatures would show up more often and make things worse. He believed the abyssal fissures were the real threat, way worse than the disturbances in the dark side. Uncle Lee frowned, thinking the creatures from the dark side were a problem, but nothing like the real beasts. In his mind, anything coming out of those fissures would be like Godzilla on a rampage. Someone cut through the tension, suggesting they should be celebrating instead. It was Uncle Lee, reminding them these were just theories, no need to panic like the world was ending. Besides, they'd been preparing for this kind of thing for ages. The team was silent, clearly unsure how to respond to Uncle Lee's calm. Uncle Lou managed a smile, easing the tension a bit. Slowly, everyone else started to lighten up too. They couldn't help but smile back. Uncle Lee motioned for someone to continue the report, and the man nodded. The man mentioned they'd go over the list of Night Watch members who'd recently fallen. The meeting wrapped up, and Uncle Lou stood by the window, staring at the city skyline. Uncle Lou fished out a pack of cigarettes. He slipped a cigarette between his lips. Digging through his other pocket, he grumbled that the shadows had picked the worst time just before the new year. Then, something caught his eye, and he froze. He pulled the cigarette out of his mouth and stared at it. Realizing it was a pocky stick, he playfully scolded Lu Yaoyao for swapping his cigarette again, fully aware of her tricks. Out of nowhere, a pack of cigarettes came flying at him. Without looking away from the pocky, he snatched the flying pack of cigarettes. He shot a glare in the direction the pack came from. It was Uncle Lee, tossing the pack, telling him not to look so serious all the time. With a cigarette dangling from his mouth, Uncle Lee asked if Uncle Lou wanted one as well. Uncle Lou dropped the pack on the table. Meanwhile, he took a bite of the pocky. He turned down the offer, joking he was worried about lung cancer. Uncle Lee raised an eyebrow, surprised, asking if Uncle Lou was serious. Uncle Lou waved him off, asking if Uncle Lee was here to chat or actually spill something important. Uncle Lee paused, exhaling smoke before answering. He finally revealed that another notice had come down from above. Uncle Lou's eyes widened, asking what kind of notice it was. Uncle Lee took his time with a puff of smoke while Uncle Lou anxiously waited. Uncle Lou's face fell when he heard what was presented this time. He was clearly worried, speechless for a moment. Uncle Lou sat, noticing the higher-ups seemed rattled, and asked if it was confirmed. Uncle Lee said he should have seen it on his computer by now. Uncle Lee checked his computer, worry plastered on his face. The emergency notice flashed second grade and above had to test their abilities. Uncle Lee asked if Uncle Lou had decided on a path for Lu Yaoyao, and Uncle Lou shrugged, saying they'd see after the test. Uncle Lou decided it was time to talk about someone else, Jianyu, the young man in the family. He suspected Jianyu wasn't the most honest and wondered if he'd go for studying spiritual energies, weird creatures, or superhuman abilities. Uncle Lee paused dramatically, taking a long drag from his cigarette. He exhaled, saying it'd be none of the above. Uncle Lou was taken aback, asking if Uncle Lee really wanted Jianyu in regular human sciences, not the extraordinary kind. Uncle Lee confirmed. Uncle Lou raised an eyebrow, asking if Uncle Lee was serious, reminding him Jianyu's abilities weren't even tested yet. What if he qualified? Then he'd be stuck with specialized human sciences. Uncle Lee snuffed out his cigarette, pressing it on the table. Uncle Lee casually dropped the bomb. He wasn't testing Jianyu. Uncle Lou was curious now. Uncle Lou asked for clarity, but Uncle Lee dodged, saying he'd take care of official stuff later and headed out for a stroll, nearly bumping into a startled lady. With Uncle Lee gone, the lady apologized, and Uncle Lou asked what was up. She set a document in front of him, explaining it was a recent notification from the dark side. Uncle Lou stared at the papers, completely confused. It was a report on a new creature, dubbed the Respectful Shadow, who exercises intensely, aka Jianyu in his shadow form. The report described him as a shadow-like figure, first spotted in the Xinyu Garden, likely by accident. Apparently, he never got tired, loved exercising, and even used training equipment. Aggression? Low. When explorers approached, he stopped exercising and greeted them. After 2 hours of observation, the risk assessment was low, and his kill record was still a big fat 0. The lady explained that the monitoring team found this bizarre being near the residential area, with no database records. She wanted Uncle Lou's take on it. Uncle Lou glared at the report, annoyed, wondering what the heck this creature even was. Over on the dark side, someone pointed out a giant spider, talking about how it had tons of protein and weighed way more than rice. Jianyu filmed the spider, noting its tender, juicy meat. He explained strong heat would remove hairs, and after tasting, it resembled neither beef nor lamb, but had a unique flavor. He stopped filming, joking that he didn't realize so many people like dark side scenery snapshots. At this rate, he'd be internet famous in no time. Jianyu was caught off guard by the sudden influx of content on exceptional abilities. Strange, since it was never allowed before. The system notification popped up, and Jianyu couldn't believe his eyes. After a deep breath, he realized what it was and started reading it, trying to stay cool. The system warned him no hunt, no life, kill to live, and maybe even become a hunter feared by all. It sounded like a twisted game. Annoyed, Jianyu punched the screen, grumbling about the system always showing up to mess with him. Then, his eyes went wide as he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The system flashed a chilling message: 100 hours left to live. Panic hit him hard. 100 hours? That was barely enough time for a coffee break. The thought echoed in his mind: 100 hours, what the heck was going on? He recalled the warning from before and wondered if this was the risk they'd been talking about. Was this it? After a deep breath, he reminded himself not to panic. There had to be a way out of this. The hunting notification hit him again. Guess it was time to hunt, or become dinner himself. Killing strange creatures seemed to be the ticket to surviving. The system added a fun twist: endless killing might just lead to immortality. Nice. Great, immortality through hunting, just another day in the life of Jianyu. The system also hinted that even if he kicked the bucket, something would remain. Naturally, Jianyu was confused. What kind of existence are we talking about here? The part about exceedingly happy kept him up at night. He'd rather not find out what that meant. If he didn't get a kill in, Uncle Lee was going to hear all about it. Spying a giant spider snoozing, Jianyu figured that would be his first kill. Better take care of that ASAP. Deciding to make the most of the situation, Jianyu set up his phone. A rare opportunity for fame, thanks to Uncle Lee's secret account. No big deal. Time to get sneaky. Jianyu summoned his shadow form. The phone clicked on, ready to capture every moment. Going live, Jianyu greeted his viewers and casually mentioned a strange creature he was about to fight: a big spider. Coin collection, anyone? Jianyu reminded the stream not to make a sound. This was a silent operation, people. Creeping closer to the spider, Jianyu whispered to the camera, "Shh, or it's game over." Jianyu gripped the iron stick he'd splurged thousands on, its metal pieces gleaming at the top, ready for action. The giant spider suddenly stirred awake. It glanced at Jianyu's last position, but he was already behind it, ninja-level stealth. The spider turned again, but Jianyu had already vanished behind it. Quiet as a mouse, Jianyu's heart thudded in his chest, sweat trickling down his face. The spider, confused, scanned the area, unable to spot him. With a gleam in his eye, Jianyu realized the shadow form was a game changer. Time to find that weak spot. He activated his skill, and a section of the spider lit up like a neon sign. Spotting the weak spot immediately, Jianyu smirked. Weapon in hand, he grinned, ready to make the spider's day a whole lot worse. Half an hour ago, the spider had been enjoying the peace, thinking this world was pretty chill. He laughed, feeling safe in this world, no terrifying creatures like the abyss, just a relaxed survival mode. Recently, he'd fought a disgusting cousin of his, got hurt, but hey, at least it was a decent meal. He planned to sleep off his injuries, thinking a few naps would fix him up. Suddenly, though, the spider sensed something was off. His spider senses tingled. Someone, or something, was targeting him. Jianyu stayed hidden, but the spider kept sensing him, turning this way and that, clearly puzzled. The spider, uneasy, decided it was time to move to a safer spot. As he moved, A sudden surge of energy hit him from behind. Something slammed into the spider, making it shriek in pain. The spider crumpled to the ground, knocked out by the surge from above. Jianyu landed the hit, feeling a rush as shadow points drained from him. He wondered if getting hit in specific spots would unlock more power. He grabbed his weapon again, contemplating whether to go for another couple of hits, since only 40% of the spider's blood would stay. Before he could finish his thought, something sharp zoomed at him. Jianyu was knocked back, slamming into a wall. The wall behind him shattered, debris raining down, but Jianyu just sighed, didn't even feel it. The giant spider shook its butt, making odd sounds, clearly in pain. As the spider moved, its health kept dropping, and Jianyu smiled. His iron stick was working wonders. Jianyu got back on his feet. Dark energy surged, and he unleashed a shadow attack. The shadows sucked Jianyu into the ground. Underground, it felt like swimming underwater, with air bubbles popping around him. Above, the spider moved, and Jianyu thought, this shadow thing's like a thief in the night. Watching the spider, Jianyu decided no need for direct combat with these weirdos. The spider wiggled its butt, hunting for him. Jianyu just waited, like a patient hunter, for the perfect strike. While keeping his eyes on the spider, Jianyu thought about the different types of the supernatural world. Grinning underground, he thought, it's hunting season, and I'm the predator. Meanwhile, someone scrolled through a live stream, some night watch guy talking about low-class creatures. Next channel, a girl giving a tour of a secret alley restaurant. Another scroll, and now it's an evildoer named Jia Damang. Next up, a magician about to wow the fam. She switched again, but now some lighter trick? She was done. This live streaming stuff was getting stale. Then, something caught her eye. It was Jianyu's stream, his channel, leveling up by killing gods, and he was you from the northern capital. Two fast-moving shadows popped up on screen. The girl lit up, asking if those shadows were real or just some special effects. Fans flooded the comments while Jianyu explained the shadow spider, a demonic, low-level abyss creature with dangerous body patterns. The girl saw the comments and fumed, calling out the online show-offs and daring them to show their families. She stared at her screen, deep in thought. Finally, she started typing up a comment on Jianyu's stream. Out of nowhere, Jianyu vanished into the ground, leaving the girl stunned. Her eyes lit up, wondering if Jianyu was some kind of superhuman. Grinning, she thought things were definitely getting more exciting. On the other side, Jianyu popped up from the ground and leaped over the shadow spider. He gave the iron stick lodged in the spider's rear a solid kick. The spider screeched, blood flying from its backside. It lunged, aiming its sharp legs straight at Jianyu. The spider's legs smashed the ground as it tried to strike Jianyu. The spider froze, waiting for the dust and debris to clear. But when the dust settled, it realized the ground it pierced was empty. Jianyu was gone. Out of nowhere, Jianyu poked the spider from behind. The spider whipped around, searching for where Jianyu had poked it. Smiling, Jianyu confirmed he was still there. The spider attacked, but Jianyu dodged with ease, taunting it, too weak? You've got 8 legs, and you still can't hit me. The girl watched, jaw dropped, as Jianyu dodged effortlessly. She snuggled under her blankets, eyes sparkling, whispering how fast and good-looking Jianyu was. Back to the action. The spider shot a sticky purple liquid at Jianyu. The liquid sizzled, burning through the concrete as it hit. The spider surrounded itself with the liquid, scanning for Jianyu. Thinking Jianyu had vanished, the spider laughed in relief. But a voice interrupted. Was the spider really that clueless to think saturating the ground with citrus would keep it safe? The spider was caught off guard when Jianyu appeared on top of a building, radiating intense energy. Jianyu casually remarked that no place is free of shadow. Then, he jumped off the building, diving towards the ground. The spider, not missing a beat, launched its corrosive liquid straight at Jianyu. The corrosive liquid splashed where Jianyu was falling, but he barely flinched, casually stating he could move through shadows at will. He popped up from another wall, showing off his teleportation and jumping skills. He declared himself the hunter, rising from the depths of shadows. With a raised iron stick, he prepared to strike the shadow spider. Landing under the spider, he mused that endless killing blurred his mind. He only remembered his name now. He pierced the spider's head from beneath, making it scream in agony. As the spider leaked corrosive liquid, Jianyu stayed crouched under it, holding the stick like it was no big deal. The liquid sizzled on him, but he didn't even flinch, introducing himself dramatically. His name was Yu. Then, everything went quiet. With the spider defeated, he used his shadow swallowing move on its remains. Dark energy from the spider swirled around him, pulling him in. Jianyu started absorbing all that dark power. A cloth fluttered in the wind, swirling with Jianyu's energy. He waved his arms, pulling in even more of the energy. The The fluttering cloth was his cape, sprouting from his shadow form as he stepped over the spider's remains, declaring the hunt over. Meanwhile, viewers on his stream were left wondering if this was real or just movie magic, praising his awesomeness and even professing their love. The girl watching clutched her phone to her chest, still in awe. Her eyes sparkled as she replayed it, saying it was so exciting she hadn't seen anything that cool in ages. She rushed to follow his account, The Killer You, knowing she couldn't miss out. Hitting the follow button, she wondered where she could find someone as entertaining as him. She typed up a message in his fan group, joking about adding a star to the next assassination mission for a high reward. The system revealed the Shadow Spider, a low-rank abyssal creature with ancient demon ties. The denser its body's lines, the stronger the spiritual pollution, perfect for staring contests with insanity. An image of the Shadow Spider appeared, all shadowy menace with an avoid eye contact vibe. The system listed acid, web release, and ancient demon corruption as its skills. Jianyu also gained Shadow Silk, more shadow points, and a waived sensory disruption fee. Talk about premium perks. Jianyu sighed, realizing he just defeated a basic rank 1 monster. So much for feeling like a hero. The gap between him and the stronger creatures still felt like a canyon, but at least shadow attacks were now in his toolkit. His grin widened when he noticed 1.5 million viewers. That number hit harder than the spider's poison. People were actually watching. With a smug nod, he ended the stream, leaving his audience hanging. Suspense was free marketing, after all. Dark threads seeped from his palm. Shadow silk? Looked cool enough to try. He shot the silk at a building. It latched on instantly. The silk yanked him forward with zero chill. Speed increased, and both hands scrambled for control. The moment he got cocky, he declared himself Spider-Man. Big mistake. A wall stopped his momentum with a concrete hug. His impact left a wall tattoo as he plummeted downward. Landing atop a streetlight, he groaned and decided Shadow Silk practice needed a lot more practice. The lifespan counter read 7 days. Only 3 extra days from that hunt? Disappointing. 7 days sounded decent, but with these creatures playing hide and seek, anxiety crept in. The system chimed in, boost Shadow Fame to unlock mysterious rewards. Intriguing. Another alert popped up. His growing reputation was already unlocking new hunter powers. First power, Mark. Tagging prey revealed weaknesses and triggered fear, depending on strength differences, like leaving a mental sticky note on the enemy. Only one prey at a time, with a 1-second window. High stakes, no do-overs. The system cautioned that Mark drained energy with each use. Oh, and one more catch: using Mark might give away his location. Next up, hunt. Capture a marked prey, and strength and agility surged. Successful hunts upgraded his abilities. The system advised quick execution. Hunt time matched Mark's 1-second limit. Confused, Jianyu wondered if his negative reputation influenced the new powers and when that reputation even started. The system helpfully reminded him, 1.5 million viewers. Right, the live stream. Jianyu grinned. Skills gained, videos edited, fame unlocked. It was all paying off. He decided extra work was in order. The hunt wasn't over. His senses stirred. Mark detected something new. A shadow creature appeared, weaknesses conveniently highlighted. Jackpot. Jianyu sprang from the streetlight. Shadow Silk flung him forward like a bungee cord with attitude. A wicked grin surfaced. Time to hunt. Back at his apartment. A cotton ball jab to the face rudely ended his nap. He yelped and complained about the unexpected skincare treatment. Lu Yaoyao stood over him, scolding him for sneaking off and picking fights. They sat silently as she dabbed antiseptic onto his wounds. He winced, grumbling that heroes deserve gentler care. She raised an eyebrow, asking which hero ended up this battered every day. With a teasing jab, she accused him of showing off without the skills to back it up. He looked away, muttering that his shadow form could heal these minor injuries, but leaving them gave her a reason to fuss over him. Lu Yaoyao asked what he was mumbling about. Flustered, Jianyu deflected by suggesting a movie night. She shot down the idea, calling the current selection garbage. Though apparently, a certain YouTuber was worth checking out. Curious, Jianyu leaned in for more details. Lu Yaoyao smirked and held up her phone. On the screen, the killer you greeted the audience. Jianyu froze. His shadow persona was her latest online obsession. Jianyu choked on his water, spraying it like a malfunctioning fountain. Lu Yaoyao raised a brow, wondering why he was acting like he'd just seen a ghost. Still dripping like a soggy sponge, Jianyu brushed it off and casually asked if she'd been watching that video again. Lu Yaoyao confirmed with a grin it hit the trending list in 2 days, and Yu was now the supernatural scene's hottest blogger. Jianyu awkwardly acknowledged her impressive knowledge, but questioned if revealing supernatural info was illegal, secretly worried about his sudden fame attracting attention from the night watch. Liu Yaoyao gave him a curious look, like he just asked if ghosts needed Wi-Fi. She clarified that the forbidden stuff stayed hidden, what people saw was basic and harmless. Liu Yaoyao scooted closer, suggesting they check out Yu's shadow combat video. She casually intertwined her arm with his, closing the gap like a pro. Jianyu froze, face heating up, while she asked if he was into the supernatural and suggested following Yu. He was speechless, watching her gush about a fan-made video featuring Yu. Jianyu smiled softly, attention locked on her. Liu Yaoyao was glued to her phone, oblivious to his gaze. Suddenly, she stood and checked her reflection. Striking a pose, she wondered aloud if she could go viral too. Jianyu smirked, teasing if she'd dance in a JKT outfit under a full moon. She shot back for him to get lost but then mused about making supernatural explainers. His sleazy grin hinted at a snarky remark, but he held back. The grin faded as he wondered if she could really outmatch Night Watch veterans just from a few articles. He half scolded her, warning that dressing like that outside was an open invite for stalkers. He puffed up with pride, bragging about shaking off a stalker last time. Liu Yaoyao's eyes narrowed at the mention of that one. Alarm shot through Jianyu as she darted behind him, gun in hand. She pressed the gun to his back with eerie calm. His heart dropped as she wondered if those bruises came from chasing JK girls. Hands up in surrender, he swore it was just a joke, but her skeptical glare said she wasn't buying it. She smacked his back with the gun, muttering that no one really knew the truth. He pleaded for mercy, calling her Officer Liu. She denied with a grin, sentencing him to kitchen duty. Jianyu collapsed onto the sofa with relief. He sighed, thinking he'd finally shaken her off until something on his phone caught his eye. Jianyu was astonished by the flood of private messages asking his identity and if he was with the Night Watch, remarking that his popularity skyrocketed in no time. His expression shifted as something else on his phone caught his attention. Jianyu was tagged in a video by Real Deal, where people claimed his video was fake, saying he shouldn't be compared to the Night Watch, sparking his curiosity about their accusations. Curiosity won. He tapped the link. The screen showed Real Deal abandoning his usual food tours for a truth-exposing mission, featuring Jianyu's latest video as Exhibit A. Real Deal asked if they'd seen the video with shadowy creatures and a forgetful assassin, urging viewers to judge its authenticity. He declared it an eye-opening investigation, pausing the footage frame by frame to highlight mismatched backgrounds and hint at sneaky edits. Real Deal zoomed in, smugly pointing out the sloppy edits masking unrealistic details. Annoyance crept in. A food blogger trying to piggyback off his fame? All for trimming a few awkward frames? Ridiculous. Real Deal declared himself a retired monster slayer, boasting about spotting fakes like Jianyu from a mile away before vaguely warning someone to watch themselves. With a sigh, Jianyu scrolled to the comments. The comment section was a battleground. Some defended the footage as legit, while others claimed editing meant deception. Someone even called Real Deal the true Nightwatch boss. With a smirk, he brushed off the hate. Critics? Old news. Like his comics days, the loudest voices often ended up exposed when the tide turned. Stretching lazily, he decided to catch another mutant. If Real Deal called it fake, he'd deliver undeniable proof. Bonus lifespan was just a perk. First, though, he had to clarify things with his underground contact. New videos flooded and some demanded apologies, others questioned his identity. Ignoring the noise, Jianyu entered the dark side, where natural hunters always turn nightmares into prey. His shadowed form stepped into the dark side. A tiny camera sat securely on his shoulder. In shadow form, he adjusted the camera, ensuring a perfect shot. Scanning the streets, he noticed fewer shadows. Maybe the dark side reset after a while, clearing out the old to welcome the new. His eyes sharpened, movement caught his attention. An old six crouched below, ready to ambush unsuspecting mutants. He gripped his iron staff, determined to show the shadow what a real old six could do. Standing at the rooftop's edge, he braced himself. Hunt mode activated. Just as he bent his knees to leap, he froze mid-motion. He glanced down, realizing the building's height was more intimidating than expected. A sudden stomach growl broke the tension, reminding him that danger wasn't the only thing he was battling. Abandoning his assassin bravado, he embraced rookie mode, cautiously taking the stairs like someone avoiding a gym injury. He positioned himself ahead, already waiting as the shadow crept around the street corner. The shadow appeared menacing, radiating a thick, oppressive energy. Without hesitation, he activated his mark skill. The shadow jerked in confusion as the mark's effect took hold. He observed the shadow's panic, noting how the mark skill triggered instant fear. The shadow's frantic search revealed its resemblance to the scythe monster from before, leaving him wondering if it had evolved. He steadied himself, deciding that his own evolution made the opponent's form irrelevant. With precision, he unleashed the rising dragon staff, driving the iron stick into the shadow's stomach. The shadow recoiled, its health bar plummeting to 45%. He surged forward without pause. The shadow tried to flee, but he launched himself upward in pursuit. Recognizing the moment, he triggered the hunt, boosting his strength and speed for a fleeting second to secure bonus rewards. He swung the iron stick, locking onto the shadow's position. The shadow swerved, leaving him to smash into the wall with impressive dedication. He blinked, surprised by the sudden miss. The shadow bolted again, wings flapping in desperation. Using the wall as leverage, he shifted direction mid-air. Twisting his body, he delivered a sharp kick, sending the shadow crashing to the ground. He landed, iron stick raised for another strike. The shadow's mouth tentacles twitched, stirring with ominous intent. Energy swirled between the writhing tentacles, gathering ominous power. A powerful gust slammed into him, knocking him off balance. The shadow unleashed waves of sonar-like energy, rippling through the air. A sudden dizziness hit Jianyu, realizing the shadow had mental attacks up its sleeve. The shadow lunged with its scythe, taking advantage of his disorientation. Unable to react, he was caught off guard once more. The force sent him skidding across the ground. His health plummeted to 66%, 34% gone in one strike. Impressive, or terrifying? The shadow, now cloaked in a dark aura, geared up for another strike. He quickly assessed it as a high-damage, agile but fragile assassin. A plan was needed, raw power wouldn't cut it here. The shadow struck, but he slipped underground, leaving it flustered above. Classic dodge and taunt move. Explosions rained down as energy blasts chased him through the shadows. The shadow kept the attacks coming, refusing to let up. He surfaced only to find the shadow already looming, attack primed. The shadow froze, confusion replacing aggression. Immobilized, it realized too late that he was ready to strike. His punch landed squarely in its stomach with a satisfying impact. The trap had worked, and the shadow had walked right into it. He unleashed a flurry of strikes, confident the shadow couldn't escape, skillful or not. Blow after blow rained down. This was his turf, and today, no shadow was flying away. The shadow screeched, gathering its strength for one last trick. He slammed it into the ground mid-scheme. Nice try, but no chance. Punches landed relentlessly, leaving the shadow trapped and helpless. It wailed as dark energy leaked from its form. A crimson orb appeared, its weak spot exposed, and he prepared the final blow. His strike halted mid-air, hesitation freezing his movements. Gasping for air, he staggered back, struggling to grasp how this was even possible. The shadow's face became clear. Lin Mo. Jianyu froze, recognizing him instantly. Confusion settled in. Lin Mo had been taken by the night watchman, so how did he end up like this? And why here? A guttural groan echoed, followed by a blast of energy that shoved Jianyu back. The shadow staggered away, groaning in pain, while Jianyu rushed after it, demanding it stop. He sprinted after the figure, insisting he had something important to say, not that the shadow cared. His breath ran out long before his determination did. He exhaled, his breath curling into tiny clouds in the cold air. Step after step, another sigh escaped, heavier than the last. Exhaustion weighed him down, and the shadow had long vanished. The system chimed in, announcing his discovery of prey upon entering the dark side. As a hunter, it declared, he should be thrilled. Victory was just a hunt away. Jianyu kept walking, aimless yet persistent. His shoulders slumped, his mood matching the dim streetlights. The system chimed in again, helpfully reminding him that his so-called successful hunt had flopped. Thanks for that. As he trudged along, the system warned that repeated failures could sap his strength and maybe even shave years off his lifespan. No pressure. His silence didn't stop the system. It lectured about how only relentless hunts and rising ranks granted true control over life and death. The system prodded further, noting the anger simmering beneath his exhaustion. Life, it said, was a hunt. Was he giving up? Jianyu stayed silent as the system poked and taunted, suggesting he just wait for death. He gave it nothing. Without warning, his fist crashed into the screen. Annoyance flared as he demanded the system stop its relentless nagging. He clenched his teeth and tightened his fist. The system finally shut up. He stared ahead, bitterly noting how heroism demanded sacrifice, but Lin Mo's fate said otherwise. His steps slowed as he glanced down at himself. The glass reflected his worn expression. He wondered what would he look like as a monster? Jianyu's mind wandered, imagining himself as a monster if death claimed him. He clenched his fist, the resolve clear. There was no turning back now. Determination etched on his face. He knew the hunt had to continue. Moments later, Jianyu arrived at the Cloud Sea gathering place, phone in hand. The reports hinted at anomalies here, so finding prey shouldn't be a struggle. Activating Shadow Pupil, he sank into the shadow forming beneath his feet. The shadow reappeared atop a nearby building. He emerged from the shadows, landing softly on the rooftop. Staying alert, he noted the anomalies here were more abundant than before. Yet, these shadows seemed timid, tucked away within the buildings. Suddenly, something caught his eye. Across the rooftop stood a shadow, bold and exposed a surprising sight. Peeking closer, he saw it was unusually muscular. The buff figure practically screamed strength. Then he spotted the heavily injured legs, its vitality almost drained. A grin surfaced. This was his chance, and failure wasn't an option. Energy swirled as Jianyu focused on a specific spot. His hand broke through the shadow pooled on the concrete. Slowly, he rose from the shadow behind the unsuspecting monster. The monster froze. It sensed him. Despite exposed weak points, he retreated into the shadows below. Silence fell, as if he'd vanished entirely. Underground, Jianyu watched the monster sniff around, surprised by its heightened senses. This wasn't his neighborhood-level threat. He shifted away, but it followed, its sense of smell sharp. The red dots dimmed, likely from its alert state, making him hesitate, but the guard had to go. The monster paced anxiously, but Jianyu held back, knowing patience was key. The monster settled, and the red dots flickered back on Jianyu. Approved. With a grin, Jianyu activated his mark skill. Meanwhile, outside, the sun was setting. Lu Yaoyao was cooking when she heard footsteps, expecting Jianyu. She asked why he was so late. She told him to hurry up, then stopped mid-sentence when she saw who was behind her. Lu Yaoyao was shocked to see Uncle Li and Uncle Lu. Uncle Li asked if she was cooking for Jianyu again, and Uncle Lu joked that she was family now. Embarrassed, Lu Yaoyao turned away, muttering about Uncle Lu bad-mouthing her again. Lu Yaoyao asked why Uncle Lu was off so early. He shrugged, saying nothing to do at work, and suggested they grab a meal. Lu Yaoyao waved him off, saying dinner was already halfway done, leaving Uncle Lu awkwardly silent. Uncle Li plopped down at the table, saying they'd go out another day and that it was the perfect time to try Lu Yaoyao's cooking, courtesy of Jianyu's skills. Uncle Li asked where Jianyu was. Lu Yaoyao shrugged, guessing he was out playing. Uncle Li grumbled about Jianyu leaving her to cook, but before Lu Yaoyao could respond, the door swung open. Jianyu barged in, starving, asking where the food was like he was about to pass out. He couldn't wait to see what she made today. In a proud mood, he pulled out her favorite lollipop, telling her he almost got bitten by a dog while getting it. Then, mid-sentence, he froze, realizing something was off. Realizing his mistake, Jianyu froze. Lu Yaoyao stared, Uncle Li facepalmed, and Uncle Lu glared. The room went silent until Jianyu's stomach growled loud enough to break it. He quickly shoved the lollipop back in his pocket, looking guilty. Laughing nervously, he claimed he'd been chased by a dog, got disoriented, and it was all just a misunderstanding. Uncle Li jumped in to end the awkwardness, saying it was a rare occasion to eat together. He told them to sit and not ruin the mood. Jianyu sat down, feeling sheepish. Uncle Li patted him on the back, saying young people fight those who don't are just old. Uncle Lu agreed, recalling when they fought for girls. He then asked about the girl Jianyu had been with last time, asking her name. Lu Yaoyao answered, saying it was Yuzhou Air. Uncle Lu nodded, saying she was beautiful and delicate, adding he'd have done anything for a girl like that when he was young. Uncle Lu raised his glass to Uncle Li, wishing him success, which clearly irritated Lu Yaoyao. Watching Lu Yaoyao fume, Jianyu realized Uncle Lu had a knack for bringing up sensitive topics. Out of nowhere, Uncle Li told Jianyu to stop sitting there and raise a glass to Uncle Lu. Jianyu raised his glass to Uncle Lu, side-eyeing the duo felt like they were ganging up on him. He knocked back his drink like it was a contest. Uncle Lu grinned, ready to let Jianyu dig his own hole. Jianyu passed Uncle Lu some food, casually mentioning it was a rare chance to taste Lu Yaoyao's cooking. Uncle Lu agreed he wasn't wrong there. With a devilish grin, Jianyu casually dropped that Lu Yaoyao was always cooking for him. No wonder she was a pro. Uncle Lu froze. This was news to him. Lu Yaoyao nervously chewed, while Uncle Lu eyed her suspiciously. He usually just ordered takeout, but it hit him Lu Yaoyao was all in for Jianyu. Uncle Lu chugged his drink, and Jianyu smirked, feeling victorious. The sun set, and Uncle Li had Jianyu toast to Uncle Lu again this time, for his hard work. Uncle Lu, not loving it, raised his glass to Jianyu anyway. Dinner wrapped up, and Jianyu waved goodbye. Uncle Li suggested they do it again sometime. Uncle Lu wasn't exactly thrilled, while Lu Yaoyao promised to see him tomorrow. The door slammed shut behind them. Inside, Jianyu grabbed a drink, offering one to Uncle Li, who politely declined. Uncle Li flopped onto the sofa, looking all serious, while Jianyu sipped behind him. The silence was broken only by the sound of Jianyu gulping down his drink. Uncle Lee sat there, looking deep in thought. Then, out of nowhere, Uncle Lee asked if he could ask Jianyu something. Straight to the point, Uncle Lee asked if Jianyu had unlocked any abilities yet. Jianyu froze. He wasn't expecting that one. He looked away, playing dumb, asking what an awakening ability even was. Uncle Lee revealed his secret: 20 years as a night watchman, so he could spot injuries from a mile away. He was onto him. Jianyu sank into defeat, not a word to say. He plopped down next to Uncle Lee, admitting it happened about half a month ago. Uncle Lee pressed for the details. Nervously, Jianyu asked if this was an interrogation. Uncle Lee assured him it wasn't a big deal, just spill the beans. Jianyu scratched his head, unsure how it happened, claiming it was just one of those suddenly moments. Uncle Lee raised an eyebrow, noting how rare it was for someone to naturally awaken, like winning the lottery on the first try. Jianyu shrugged, casually dropping that it was probably his natural talent kicking in. Uncle Lee's gaze sharpened, sending a chill down Jianyu's spine. Something felt off. Uncle Lee gave him a tap on the shoulder, and Jianyu swore he felt some sort of power surge. The clock ticked louder than ever, filling the tense silence between them. Uncle Lee broke the silence, dropping the bomb that anyone with talent had to take the martial exam unless their willpower was basically non-existent. Jianyu mentioned Lu Yaoyao had already mentioned this, and Uncle Lee was caught off guard. How did she know before him? Uncle Lee sighed, mentioning the growing pressure at the night watch and casually offering Jianyu a backdoor to skip the exam and focus on college instead. Jianyu was taken aback. Could Uncle Lee really just toss around offers like that? Uncle Lee suggested some top universities, remembering Jianyu's love for comics and offering a spot in the art department. Jianyu, impressed, called him a genius. Uncle Lee's jaw dropped when Jianyu asked if he could just grab a diploma without attending class. Bold move. Uncle Lee gave him a playful smack, telling him to aim for the stars with requests like that. Uncle Lee mentioned Winter Academy, promising stability after graduation and a peaceful life with Lu Yaoyao. Jianyu's smile faded as he called out to Uncle Lee, sensing something was up. Teeth clenched, Jianyu stared back, while Uncle Lee gave him a sharp look. Jianyu's eyes grew serious as he insisted he wanted to see what being extraordinary felt like. Uncle Lee, visibly frustrated, refused, making it clear Jianyu had to follow his advice this time. Realizing he just shut down Jianyu, Uncle Lee froze in awkward silence. Still pointing, Uncle Lee stood there, unsure of how to fix his sudden authority trip. Jianyu shot back, rejecting the backdoor plan and threatening to report Uncle Lee to the night watch. Uncle Lee's eyes widened. Jianyu wasn't playing around with that threat. They stood off in silence, both sizing each other up. Uncle Lee's expression darkened as he warned Jianyu about the dangers of the extraordinary world, advising him to stick to studying for now. Jianyu stood firm, arguing that danger was everywhere, and he couldn't rely on Uncle Lee forever. The tension in the room thickened as they locked eyes, both lost in thought. With a sigh, Uncle Lee gave in, warning Jianyu that he'd regret it once he fully understood, but he'd always be there if he changed his mind. Jianyu urged Uncle Lee to stay clear of shady business to avoid getting caught. Uncle Lee agreed and turned to leave, saying there was nothing else to discuss. Just as Uncle Lee turned to leave, Jianyu called him back. Jianyu brought up a concern from Lu Yaoyao's research. Could someone have died after exhausting their powers, but still turned into something else? Uncle Lee pondered for a moment before answering. He confirmed it was possible, as either abilities or outside interference could cause that outcome. Jianyu caught on right away. Uncle Lee asked why the sudden interest, but Jianyu brushed it off, claiming it was just curiosity. Uncle Lee reminded him that, with the martial arts exam ahead, he'd eventually encounter all kinds of strange stuff. Uncle Lee advised a good night's rest and to stay out of trouble. Jianyu promised to take it easy. Uncle Lee suddenly remembered to mention that the martial arts exam was starting after the Lunar New Year, catching Jianyu off guard. With a wave, Uncle Lee reminded him to prepare well. Jianyu nodded, agreeing. The next chapter had a half-empty page, with Jianyu holding his head. Guess he was having a rough time. The girl following Jianyu's account was practically glowing, excited to see a new video notification. She opened the video, only to be hit with harsh comments. Some said he was just trying to get famous, others mocked his editing skills, claiming real battles involved weapons, not video tricks. Annoyed, she muttered about how haters were everywhere, clearly jealous of Yu's talent. She vowed to shut them up soon enough. Furious, she typed away, defending Yu from all the pointless criticism. Her fingers flew across the phone, her aura as ominous as a villain in a drama. But then, a hint of doubt crept in. What if Yu was a scammer after all? As she clicked play, she silently hoped it wasn't an apology video. The video opened with a dramatic text, "If he didn't hunt, he'd die," followed by Jianyu standing at the edge of a building, looking ready for action. Captivated, she couldn't help but marvel at the scene. How cool was that? She pictured herself right there with him, feeling the rush of being part of the action. Out of nowhere, Jianyu leapt off the building, and she gasped. Everything went blurry, and she wondered, no way, did that just happen? The girl was glued to the video, feeling like she was strapped to Jianyu's back as he dove straight for the ground, screaming in disbelief. Eyes squeezed shut, tears threatening as she screamed. This was like a roller coaster, but way scarier. Something felt off. She cracked one eye open, trying to figure out what was going on. Her jaw dropped when she saw they weren't falling anymore. Jianyu had latched onto Shadow Silk and was swinging like some kind of superhero. She couldn't help but marvel, was Jianyu some kind of superhuman or just ridiculously cool? Out of nowhere, a blast of energy hit Jianyu, knocking him back like a ragdoll. The blast was so strong it sent him crashing to the ground, causing a massive explosion. Her heart sank as she saw the monster's foot on Jianyu's chest. This wasn't looking good. The monster roared in victory, but the girl couldn't help but think this was insane. Jianyu was definitely no ordinary human. Then, in a flash, Jianyu shot his shadow silk straight up. 2 strands of shadow silk shot out, pulling him up just in time to deliver a solid kick to the monster. She couldn't help but swoon. Jianyu was just too cool for words. The girl watched, wide-eyed, as Jianyu fought the monster like a pro. A perfect kick to the monster's face. Jianyu wasn't messing around. But the monster wasn't having it, and landed a punch right in Jianyu's stomach. She winced as Jianyu took the hit, but she was still impressed. This was no fake showdown. Alien species, powers, all of it. This was the real deal. Back in action, Jianyu jumped out of the way of the monster's next attack. The monster froze, sensing something behind it. Jianyu struck from behind, piercing the monster's chest and wiping out its health bar. The girl was practically glowing. He was a real fighter from the northern capital. Jianyu yanked his hand out of the monster's body, covered in gross, sticky green goo. The girl watched, eyes wide, as Jianyu used his Shadow Devourer skill on the monster's corpse. She thought about it for a second. Was Jianyu absorbing powers from the alien species? Did the spider webs come from a shadow spider? She couldn't contain her excitement, eagerly waiting to see what new abilities Jianyu might unlock. Meanwhile, someone tossed their clothes into the laundry basket. Jianyu, now back to reality, grimaced as he touched his injury. Yeah, that hurt. Bandaging up, Jianyu admitted those aliens were tough, but their injuries made the fight a lot easier for him. His phone pinged, snapping Jianyu out of his thoughts. Jianyu glanced at his phone to see a video from Di Dao, who casually introduced himself, claiming the latest upload from you was real, no edits involved. Di Dao mentioned that the monster had been barely standing, so anyone with some energy could have taken it down. Frowning at the screen, Jianyu watched Di Dao question why he was tackling such simple tasks if he was really that special. Annoyed, Jianyu turned off his phone with a frustrated tap. Jianyu mumbled to himself how Di Dao was seriously getting on his nerves. He dropped onto the couch, already done with the day. Thinking back to the fight, he realized his strength was lacking, and taking on top-tier aliens would be a struggle. He made a mental note, time to get stronger, fast. He was determined to get so strong that no one could question his power. The system stats popped up. He looked strong, but reality hit, he was still weak. Staring at the screen, Jianyu could only blink, confused by the system's readout. Giving the screen an imaginary uppercut, Jianyu scoffed, claiming he was already leagues stronger than Liu Yaoyao and could handle 50 of Uncle Liu. But that wasn't enough. Jianyu wanted more power and extra skills from his past battles. He remembered thinking shadow points were like XP, but turns out, they were more like energy reserves. Using Shadow Silk took 3 points, Shadow Eyes just 1, and abilities like Deadly Strike and Hunting ate up varying amounts. Swirling dark energy in his palm, Jianyu experimented with his power. He played around with dark energy, revealing how shadow form drained less in shadows but more under the sun. With the qualification test approaching, Jianyu activated recovery mode. Stepping out of the living room, Jianyu got ready for the next challenge. On the balcony, Jianyu figured even those with special talent were only a fraction of his power, enough to intimidate anyone before the test. He noticed how even the strongest trees could fall to the wind, and a little bragging never hurt to grab some attention. Jianyu decided humility wasn't his vibe. He'd flex his power at the test, and with Uncle Lee backing him, he had nothing to worry about. Laughing like he won the lottery, Jianyu noticed the old man downstairs casually watering his plants, probably wondering what all the noise was about. The old man overheard Jianyu and muttered that the kid upstairs had definitely lost it this time. Morning hit, and Jianyu was already over it, clearly bored. sitting in the mall with Zhao Peng, impatience practically oozed from him. As Lu Yaoyao and the others shopped, Jian Yu called out Zhao Peng for misleading him promised 1 hour, but now it was half the day gone. Jian Yu looked like he was about to pass out from boredom, warning Zhao Peng not to waste another second, while Zhao Peng joked it might jinx them for the year. With dead seriousness, Jian Yu made it clear he wasn't joking. No hunting, no survival. Zhao Peng, genuinely spooked, asked if Jian Yu was being for real. Jian Yu waved it off, grinning as Lu Yaoyao and the girl finally finished their shopping. Lu Yaoyao casually asked about food, the girl suggested salad, all while dark energy trailed them unnoticed. Jian Yu couldn't understand the appeal of those herbs, pushing them to hurry so he could show them a better place to eat. When they saw the menu oysters, grilled chickpeas, and beef penis, someone couldn't hide their shivers. Lu Yaoyao, visibly furious, asked if this was what Jian Yu considered everyone's preference, while the other girl half-jokingly said it was perfect for guys. Jian Yu, nursing his injuries, went for comfort food: toast, fried rice, egg soup, and the waiter didn't argue. Lu Yaoyao's anger flared up when she saw his simple order, about to lecture him before Jian Yu cut her off. He demanded his simple order, plus fresh, oversized oysters, leaving the waiter stunned and Lu Yaoyao speechless. Moments later, the food arrived, with the waiter reminding them to take their time. Offering an oyster, Jian Yu tried to smooth things over, but Lu Yaoyao wasn't having any of it. Just then, Lu Yaoyao's phone buzzed, pulling her attention away. The notification revealed the martial arts test was now set to start on February 17th, with the specialized training camp kicking off on the 25th. The girl was shocked, asking if the test date had really been moved up and if it was mandatory. Zhao Peng, looking stressed, pointed out that the qualifications test was coming soon, and things were getting more complicated. Jian Yu reassured them, confident he'd pass the test, while Zhao Peng muttered a sarcastic thanks. Zhao Peng grimly reminisced about the time he was chased by a specter at 7, leaving him ill and psychologically scarred. Jian Yu boasted that he would have fought the specter, which made Lu Yaoyao face-palm, questioning if he thought everyone else was just as reckless. Lu Yaoyao called out the escape mentality, comparing it to an ostrich burying its head in the sand, just how most people reacted. She reminded them that, while it was a win, the scars from the alien mess still lingered. A few more dishes hit the table, keeping the feast going. Lu Yaoyao shot Jian Yu a death stare, making him squirm while their friends looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Jian Yu hesitated, his words caught in his throat. Trying to lighten the mood, he suggested a toast to shake off the tension. Just as he raised his glass, the alarm blared, cutting him off. The alarm set everyone on edge, including Jian Yu, who looked less than thrilled. Lu Yaoyao's face went pale as she realized pollution detection alarms. She rushed to explain that the alien species had breached the commercial center. Everyone was vibing, and then the alarms ruined the fun. One guy screamed, telling everyone to run. Chaos broke out as people scrambled for the exits, pushing and yelling. The exit was packed, some yelling at others to hurry or risk dying, while Jian Yu and his crew just stood there, side-eyeing the madness. Zhao Peng, concerned, noted the crowd, while the girl asked what their next move was. Lu Yaoyao tried to keep it together, telling everyone to chill. Getting out wasn't impossible. Just then, someone suggested they move away from that spot. Jian Yu surprised everyone by punching a hole in the wall to make an escape route. Lu Yaoyao gave him a look of admiration, watching him stand there like a boss. He waved his friends over, telling them to stop standing around and run already. The girls helped Zhao Peng onto the street while Jian Yu scanned the area. Out of nowhere, dark energy shot up from the ground behind a man talking about the aliens. Jian Yu stiffened. From the energy, a massive monster appeared, and the man shouted that the aliens had arrived. Jian Yu gritted his teeth. If he fought that monster right now, everyone would know. Just then, someone grabbed Lu Yaoyao, and she jumped. Jian Yu yanked Lu Yaoyao toward the crowd, pulling her to safety while the others followed. He suggested they head out first. Lu Yaoyao glanced back, wondering how the alien managed to break through the supposedly secure center. Jian Yu brushed off the question, saying it was too late for that chat, and they needed to bail before things got worse. He pointed ahead, urging everyone to move faster towards safety. Just then, the ground shook, freezing everyone in their tracks. Jian Yu warned everyone to be careful as the place started to crumble, grabbing onto them for support. As they fell, Jian Yu grabbed Lu Yaoyao's arm, who then clutched the girl, screaming her lungs out, while the girl hung on to Zhao Peng, who was muttering curses. They landed in total darkness, with cries for help echoing around them. Jian Yu winced, rubbing his sore behind. He quickly checked on his friends, asking if they were all right. Lu Yaoyao reassured him that she and the girl were fine, just a couple of scratches. Zhao Peng wasn't so lucky. His leg was trapped under a concrete pillar, and he was pretty sure it was broken. Jian Yu and the others rushed to Zhao Peng's side, checking on him. Grabbing the pillar, Jian Yu calmed everyone, saying there was no need to freak out and that he'd clear the debris first. With a grunt, Jian Yu lifted the debris. He pulled the debris off Zhao Peng's legs. Zhao Peng screamed in horror as he looked at his mangled leg. As Jian Yu tossed the debris aside, Zhao Peng's pain was clear on his face. Just then, someone appeared with medicine. Lu Yaoyao took charge, telling Zhao Peng to take the painkillers to help ease the pain. As he swallowed the pills, Zhao Peng asked where they were and why everything was so dark. Lu Yaoyao shrugged, admitting she had no idea. She'd never been in a situation like this. Meanwhile, Jian Yu ran his hand along the floor. Realizing it was the commercial center's floor, he guessed they'd ended up in the basement. Suddenly, dark energy pulsed through his hand. Jian Yu froze, recognizing the energy. He couldn't believe it, thinking this was impossible. He glanced around, feeling like they'd been yanked into the dark side. Others were stuck in the dark too, one moaning about a hurt leg, another pinned under a pillar, and a kid crying for her dad, who promised help was on the way. Jian Yu clenched his teeth, realizing the mess they were in. Too many people stuck, and with no movement in the shadow layer, it'd take the night watch a while to get here. He scanned his friends, worried that if they stayed much longer, even if the aliens didn't attack, the pollution might get them first. Jian Yu made it clear they needed to get out, and fast. Then, Jian Yu asked Lu Yaoyao if she had the watch Uncle Li gave her. Lu Yaoyao checked herself, and realized she had it on. She'd almost forgotten. A wave of relief hit as Lu Yaoyao pressed the watch. Lu Yaoyao explained that the watch could send a distress signal, and help would be there soon. The girl praised Lu Yaoyao, calling her brilliant for saving them with it. Jian Yu grinned at Lu Yaoyao, unsure if help would come fast, but at least the watch would keep the pollution at bay for a while. He dropped into a fighting stance, warning everyone that the aliens could show up any second. No time to relax. Just as Jian Yu feared, shadows began to creep into the area. Panic spread as people screamed about the monsters. Jian Yu nodded grimly. They were here. And then the ground shook again. Jian Yu grew uneasy, sensing something was off. The ground gave way, collapsing once more. Lu Yaoyao coughed, the air thick with dust. She winced, her arm hurt, and called out to her friends, asking where they were. Xiao Xiao appeared, letting Lu Yaoyao know she was there. Xiao Peng's voice came next, asking where they were and why it was so dark. He was also looking for Jian Yu. Xiao Xiao pointed something out, urging everyone to take a look. A huge crack appeared in the ground, and Lu Yaoyao's worry grew as Xiao Xiao wondered if Jiang Yu had fallen into it. Meanwhile, the girl with white hair was dragged into the dark side, groaning in pain as bruises spread across her. She winced as she tried to sit, clearly in pain. Finally sitting, she wondered what had just happened. She recalled going shopping with Xiaoya when the alarms blared, and they'd bolted with the crowd. She called out for Xiaoya, desperately searching for her. Her hand brushed against a pool of blood, and she noticed a bloody hand nearby. Horror set in as she realized the hand belonged to Xiaoya and she was mutilated. She trembled, tears streaming down as she tried to call Xiaoya again. Out of nowhere, the shadow-wielding scythes reappeared behind her, lifting one in the air. Still shaking, she jumped at the sight of it behind her. The shadow's grotesque face made her wonder if this was how she was going to go. She thought to herself, this stuff only happens in movies. With the shadow about to strike, she imagined if she were the movie heroine, some hero would swoop in. Accepting her fate, she closed her eyes, realizing no one would save her in real life. No heroes in the real world, she muttered as the slash came down. Blood trickled down, forming a small pool on the ground. She lay there, stunned, as Jiang Yu appeared in his shadow form, standing between her and the threat. She wiped away her tears, confused by his sudden appearance. Jiang Yu blocked the scythe with his bare hand, making her wonder if he was the hero she'd been hoping for. With ease, Jiang Yu threw the shadow aside. Surprised, she was about to ask him something, but before she could speak, Jiang Yu unleashed Shadow Claw, his attack intensifying with power and flexibility. She stared in awe as Jiang Yu vanished right before her eyes. Jiang Yu leaped into the air, positioning himself above the shadow for his attack. His rapid slashes pushed the shadow back, each hit landing with precision. The shadow planted its scythe into the ground, trying to resist being pushed further back. It barely caught its breath, managing to halt its retreat. Realizing who had saved her, her eyes turned into hearts, questioning if this was some kind of dream. He jumped, startled by the girl's sudden scream from behind him. The girl circled him, gushing that she was his #1 fan, had watched all his videos, and loved them. Jian Yu awkwardly cleared his throat, pointing out her torn stockings and dress. She blushed and snapped, asking where he was looking, while Jiangyu stammered, claiming he was just giving her a friendly reminder. She winked playfully, suggesting she could change into a new dress for him if he wanted. Jianyu's nose bled, and he drooled at the thought, clearly distracted. The shadow watched, baffled, as Jiangyu double-checked if she meant it, and if the dress was silk. The girl teased him, adding she'd even bring spicy chicken. The shadow roared in frustration, clearly annoyed at being ignored. Jianyu snapped back to battle mode, assuring her that silk or not, they could talk about it later. The girl was practically bouncing with excitement as Jianyu disappeared into his shadow. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, don't forget to subscribe and like the video.